Hi everyone, welcome back to the Dark Pixel Podcast. My name is Mike.
I'm Landon.
I'm Kason.
And we're going to talk today about Kingsglaive and a lot about Final Fantasy 15. Mm-hmm. So,
a lot of Kingsglaive today.
I have...
we just watched it.
We just watched it, and we're basically going to do a review of Kingsglaive. That's basically what this podcast is going to be, like half of it probably. We'll also be talking about... Final Fantasy 15. It was announced recently that the first half of the game will be like more open in its structure, and that the second half would be very linear and narrative driven. So we'll talk about that. We're going to talk about this new Galaxy 3DS crazy weird announcement they made yesterday. And then we'll do one suggested topic from Matt this week. He wants to know what topics are inappropriate for games, or if there are any.
I want to know what topics are appropriate for this podcast.
Yep.
That's what
there actually are some.
Very important question.
In our podcast.
Anyways, so if you're listening to this audio only, you can find us on YouTube at Dark Pixel for our filmmaking and Dark Pixel Gaming for our game analysis. And that's where this podcast goes. So let's just jump right into this review of Kingsglaive here.
So we're gonna kind of need to split this spoiler versus no spoiler.
Oh, good point.
Yes.
So if you have seen Kingsglaive, we will want to give some very specific kind of analysis and critique, and we'll do that. I have in the description of the video here. For you listening audio only, I don't know if I can help you, but if you're watching the video, there will be timestamps in the description, so you'll be able to skip to the points in the podcast that you want to listen to. I will have an annotation come up here on the screen that will have a time on it saying skip to this time to move past the spoilers. If you're listening audio only, be careful about spoilers.
If you're listening audio only, you might want to actually find the podcast on YouTube.
Yeah.
So you can skip ahead.
Or just skip ahead and hope you don't hear something crazy.
But for the first
very far ahead,
are we going to do
go
spoilers?
Let's start no spoilers.
We'll start no spoilers.
And then we'll make an announcement.
Then we'll go into spoilers.
We'll release the floodgates. Okay. So cool. We just watched this film, so it's worth noting that we haven't slept on it. We haven't given it tons and tons of thought. These are our initial reactions to as fans of games.
These are
and
fresh,
films.
hot takes.
Yeah, this is like what we think.
Fresh out the fryer.
Fresh out the fryer. Fresh out
an hour
after seeing it.
Obviously our perceptions could change, but these are our initial thoughts.
Okay. I don't know. Why don't you start it off and we'll go that way.
So I really enjoyed the movie. What it did mostly for me is I feel like it made me more interested in what's going to be coming next. It made me really interested in actually playing Final Fantasy 15. So to that end, I think it probably did all that it was really supposed to do. I think the world is so beautifully crafted. It's very, it feels very complete. It feels like, and to me, that's a remarkable accomplishment, considering you've got like Audis driving around, and then you've got,
ads everywhere.
Yeah. I think that the architecture helped a lot. Like, it's very hybrid. It's not just like castles and then cars. It's like...
It feels European in that sense, because you got like that history there of like the Gothic structures, and it looks very ancient and like, what do you call it, like kingly or royal, but at the same time you have all this new development.
And they've kind of built around a lot of that, I really like that. I think they did a great job with that. I think like art direction wise and production design wise, they did a phenomenal job. The costume designs for the most part make sense for everybody. I thought that the voice acting was lacking for most of the characters in the film. And right now, my current theory is just that when people look that real, you need to do the motion capture and voice acting at the same time. I just feel like you need to do that to actually hit the nail on the head. Otherwise, it's an uphill battle for the animators.
And for those of you who are questioning whether or not they were separate, the voice acting and the motion capture, they had different credits for motion capture for the character and then voice for the character. So the people voicing it were not doing motion capture.
Yeah, so it's...
Otherwise, their lips would have matched up a little bit.
It would have matched up a little better. I feel like the characters look extremely real in the action sequences. When they're cruising around and they're not supposed to be showing subtle and nuanced expressions when you know this guy's supposed to look determined and he looks dang determined. It works really, really well. A lot of the characters, the first time you see them, it's like, wow, they look totally real. But you start to get used to how they look. And after enough of seeing them, you start noticing they only move their face this way or that way, and it's not as expressive as you would have liked. There's specific characters that I feel like the casting for the voice was completely, I would even say wrong. Yeah. Like totally wrong. I'm really curious how many of these characters we will see or hear their voices again in the video game. I'm certain a number of them we will. But I mean, overall, like, I enjoyed it, but I came away from it understanding why anybody going in completely cold and never wanting to play Final Fantasy 15 probably would not have enjoyed the experience at all. They do very much, they're trying to do too much with what they have to work with. There's a lot of characters and a lot of names of places and things and concepts that just get thrown around, and even some things that get thrown at you extremely late in the film. So that's my initial little summary of my thoughts. So.
Okay, for me, I agree completely on the note of the world being fully realized and very interesting. I think that's probably the greatest achievement that they have so far with the story, as I have seen from the anime and into the film now. This world feels really, really good, and it feels like very fleshed out, very complete, as you said. The problem for me with this film is that they have this great groundwork, this like awesome baseline, this amazing outline that they're working with, and the techniques used to tell this story are just not very good, in my opinion. And I think that this problem stems even back into the problems that I've had with the storytelling, again, the techniques used, basically from Final Fantasy VIII and onwards. Not that Final Fantasy VIII storytelling was bad. Like, that's just kind of where I started to see this trend a little bit. 9 is excluded from that. It's 8, 10, and then I haven't played 12, but 13 especially. 13 is the biggest offender to me. But where they tried to do too much, I feel like. They tried to develop too many characters, and they have this great like underlying concept that is sort of muddled by like too much ambition, like trying to do too much with it. And in this film specifically, what bothered me was that they put the viewer in this kind of omnipresent place where we get to see everything that's happening and understand the whole thing. And so you don't necessarily get to see the events from the perspective of the characters that we're watching. So not only so in this movie you have kind of these two perspectives. You have the perspective of the royalty of the events that are going on, and then the perspective of these members of the Kingsglaive, which are largely made up of refugees from outside of the city of Insomnia, which is like the capital city of this kingdom, which is the one that's protected by the shield. There are obviously other territories outside of that this kingdom is, that the king is sovereign over. But so these characters are refugees from those outlying territories that are being invaded, and they've been brought in to become part of this like elite force. And so you're getting like half of the perspective of the movie from them and half of the perspective of the movie from the royalty. And so the emotional moments that come from this, and we'll get into this more when we go into spoilers, I don't feel like that they land because we've spent so much time developing this and you already understand their point of view, so it kind of undermines why these people are doing what they're doing. At least for us, because we know that they're faulty in the way that they think, because we've seen their reasons for why these people do this. Does that make sense? So there's a lack of sympathy for kind of either side, because we're not seeing it from their perspective. We're seeing it from this omniscient sort of like third person
It's like watching the Super Bowl without a team you're rooting for.
Yeah. That's yeah. So, anyways, that's kind of like my biggest problem with it. But I mean, on top of the voice acting, which I think they have some excellent voice actors for the royalty side, and really, really bad voice actors for the refugee Kingsglaive side. And I really just wish they had picked one side or the other to make the movie about, and have focused on that, and it would have made the whole thing a lot stronger. Yeah, so that's kind of like sort of my major problem with it. But I would say overall, like, and then I felt actually that the action was very poorly shot. For the wrong term, but you know what I mean, because it's a fully CGI movie, but their cinematography was confusing, and there's no reason for that. In a fully CGI movie where you can put your camera wherever you want, like, everything should be clear when you cut from here to here. I felt like a lot of it was very confusing, and that doesn't make sense to me. It's harder to do when you're shooting live action. You can't put your camera wherever you want. I mean, depending on your budget, you can almost do that, but you can't really. And in this, it's like, just put the camera in the spot where we can understand what we're looking at, you know? So, anyways, that's my take for now.
So, I enjoyed Kingsglaive. So, what I wish they did with Kingsglaive would be a little more what they did with Advent Children, where you're following the main character. But the point of Kingsglaive is to show what's happening at the city while the main character isn't there. And so
of the main character of Final Fantasy 15.
Exactly. Right? And so it gets confusing. They should have picked a new main character, or they should have done something, but understanding in Final Fantasy 15 you'll be playing as one person, but in this movie that he's not involved. I feel like that presented them with like a pretty big challenge as far as like how to tell this story. And I don't know, like I was okay with the omniscient perspective, given that I was able to become, I was able to see the world really well from kind of all perspectives and from a bunch of different angles, and was able to kind of see all the different aspects of how the world goes. The thing that was missing for me as far as having a main character was knowing that the main character of Final Fantasy 15 isn't even in this movie. So I don't know. That was just like a huge problem for the story. I felt like the CG was very good. The animation was very good. The facial animation was a little weird, and that kind of goes along with the voice acting. But overall, the movie's really good, and it looks good. It's set like in a sweet world, and if this was my only foray into the world of Final Fantasy 15, I'd be pretty disappointed, right? But knowing that this is the prologue, like that everything isn't supposed to work out, even though it is a film, and seeing it as a film, it's disappointing in a lot of ways. But knowing that, you know, this is a prologue of what's to come, that I'm okay with that. I actually really enjoyed the film, knowing that, hey, okay, maybe we'll see why that happened later, or maybe we'll figure out this backstory later, or maybe there's at least the potential that could happen throughout the medium of a video game, and that they purposefully chose not to show certain things, maybe because we can then explore them in the game and it'll have more impact. So I don't know why they made all their decisions, but I do know that the world is sick and it's awesome. I totally want to watch the movie again because of that. And if that's all that they wanted from this film was to get people hyped because the world's sick and they want to go back to that world, I'm all in. So
yeah,
I liked it.
Talking about the world, the one thing I did not like was, and I get it, you need product placement to pay for your thing, but every time there was product placement, it was so obvious. It was hard, at least to me. Yeah. The product placement is mostly, besides the car, it's mostly in the form of just ads that are around town, right? They're just passing ads, and so they're not every ad is for a real world company, at least that I could recognize. A lot of it was like the Bank of
Bank of Lucius,
and places like that. But there was Beats, some Beats ads, some
Dr. Dre existed in that world, I guess.
Japan Airlines. Japan Airlines.
Yeah, why?
Japan.
Why is Japan Airlines?
That is a specific place.
Add in this.
So
on Earth.
how's Japan defending from Niflheim? That's what I want to know. But Japan Airlines, and then of course Audi, and there's probably more Audi than anything else.
There was one specific shot where the camera is following the Audi as it's driving, and I'm just looking at the logo. I'm like, that's totally an Audi logo. It's getting closer. Oh my gosh, this is so obvious product placement. And then for the last maybe half a second of while that shot was on, I realized it was a gorgeous shot. Yeah. There was like the cityscape in the background.
Exactly.
The everything, it was just beautiful. And I didn't get to see that.
And that's
because I was looking at the product placement.
Yeah, that's how I felt every time I saw it. It was distracting. It didn't feel like it belonged. Like, I know with Jurassic World, a lot of people complained about the product placement in that movie. And I haven't seen that movie, so I can't say specifically, but that, at least, those are companies that exist in that world.
Right. At least kind of.
This,
Japan Airlines
stuff. So, how do you integrate product placement in it? I mean, it kind of makes it like they're lucky they're in a modern-ish setting, because otherwise, what's their product placement going to be if it's like Final Fantasy 9? And how are you going to work stuff into that? So, that's thinking about the world and it feeling complete. That was the one thing that stood out. It just stood out a lot to me every time.
That was pretty difficult.
I mean, you got to pay for your stuff somehow.
You know what's super sweet? Is the shields.
The shield effects. Yeah.
It's this weird physical, cool. Non-physical kind of thing that cool. It almost feels as though what they're doing is like has a basis in like chemistry, that they're like taking the water of the air and freezing it, and it's like an ice shield almost that can like shatter, and it's this sweet like. It's really cool.
Yeah, that looked really awesome.
You have to watch it, but it's super cool.
Yeah, all the magic effects are very, very cool. And
lots of particle effects.
There's like, okay, we're not going to spoil anything yet. We'll talk about the details later, but there's almost this like unifying quality to it. Like it's all visually and like technically like very similar in terms of like the type of magic it is. So it's like it's all it's coming from the same source.
Well, it's not like this dude's doing water and then he's doing fire or whatever.
Yeah, and so like all the magic, it's like definitely coming from one source, which plays very well into like the theme of the movie. And so like, anyways, they did a really good job visually of representing that magic. I think thought it was really well done.
Yeah, I thought so too.
I'm trying to think right now of any non-spoilery extra stuff to go over, but there were a lot like going along with like cool. Mike was talking about the odd cinematography at times. I feel like there was also editing wise, there's just odd cuts sometimes. There's a lot of fade to blacks where I
weird
don't know why
that was
and it was a
weird.
It's a short shot that fades to black, so it's like cut, fade to black.
Like, but then it fades back in, and it's still the same scene.
Yeah,
it's not like it's transitioning.
Fades, generally, in editing, fades are used to transition us from one place to another,
or from one time to another. Yeah, or,
and even then, they're not used that often because it feels strange. It's got it's usually used to really signify something's coming to an end.
Letting it settle.
Like a character passes out, and then we're going to move forward in time and to another place.
Right.
Or like, oh man, like I'm so sad, I'm so depressed. Like boom, and they let it settle on that.
Right.
While we then move to a new place, new day.
It's a little bit of a palette cleanse.
And in this movie, they are doing like 5 fades in the same location in the same scene.
Yeah.
It's like, what the fuck?
There was one fade that I liked. I was like, good fade.
Was that the last one?
No. No, it wasn't that one.
Just kidding.
But other than that, it was like, why? What?
Yeah, very interesting editing choices.
I feel like people that work on these kinds of projects, like, supposedly this was animated by a team kind of scattered around the globe, like a few different studios, and we're keeping
what was it called?
Secret.
Something 6. What was the
Stage 6 or something? Was Sony's sub-production company or whatever?
Sony's?
I think it's a Sony subsidiary. But but then weird editing in the middle of action, cuts to angles that are essentially it's just like trying to obfuscate what even happened. It's almost like when you watch behind the scenes and you see like, oh, that car went off a ramp and you didn't see the ramp because they chose an angle to try and hide something so that it worked still. Right. But like you're saying, you don't need to do that. You don't need to do that kind of stuff. You don't need to pick weird angles, and it's possible they're picking angles that mimic like how some real life movies are shot, so it feels more grounded.
Right.
But I almost feel like they had so much freedom to do whatever they wanted with the camera, that they just chose to do like nonsensical stuff with the camera.
All the action can be completely clear because you've animated your whole scene here. You just take this camera and put it in whatever place will most clearly show that action.
Yeah.
And they picked angles that like clearly like obstruct you from being able to see what's happening.
Like
It's
there
possible
were
they did that on purpose.
there were
but-
maybe
Yeah, sure.
there were a few action sequences that I thought were shot well, and I actually remember thinking that like when we got to them, I was like, okay, like good job on that one. Why didn't you do the other one like that? Like there's maybe we'll talk about this later with the spoilers, but there's one in particular I'm thinking of which was like just awesome camera movement, and but so we had heard before, I think we talked about this last week, some reviewers were confused by and I don't even know what it's called, but the warping ability.
The warping
ability.
ability.
With their weapon, you can
Throw it and then
throw it and move to it.
Yeah.
That was like it was a little confusing at the beginning, but I don't think it was that confusing by the end.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
I agree.
I think
They
I mean, it's not that difficult to follow. Like wherever I throw this thing, I'll end up there.
going
Right.
So like they show the
first time it
direction it's being
happens,
thrown, and
weird, but
he's going
that way somewhere.
It's not like I throw over there and then you appear like back there. Like, it's not a confusing concept after you've seen it demonstrated twice.
I mean, it's no more
exactly.
or less confusing than like apparating in a Harry Potter movie, where it's
Exactly.
like you could be
In fact,
going anywhere. You're not indicating where you're
Right.
going to go
Right.
initially, at least.
Right.
Yeah, and then the momentum that carried, that was a phenomenal job by the animators. Like, really, the animators did a great job.
They really did, yeah.
To anybody's credit to animate this well. I mean, like that's just like awesome job. All of the problems with the subtle nuances with the face, it's just like an uphill battle. Like I recognize that. It's just so hard.
You can't do it the traditional way. You got to use motion capture to make that work. It's the only way. And they separated the voice talent from the motion capture, so you can't match. You can't match the emotion. You can't match the lips.
What?
You just can't match that.
Okay, I want to watch this again, but I want to watch it in Japanese
Oh, dude, that would be cool watching.
because I'm
Japanese.
curious.
If they changed the
Because they did well. I think they did change.
They did. The lips were definitely speaking English.
It's more obvious.
That might be why they couldn't do the whole face cap thing,
Right.
Because that would be
you're
way
wondering
harder to do it
if
in
the
both.
Japanese actors did.
Exactly.
Well, because
whereas the
it's
American
possible
ones
that
didn't.
like what they were doing to make it work for the English, maybe like something about the face was working a little better in the Japanese. You know what I mean? Like I don't know if they. I don't know. I'd like to see just
I would too,
out of
actually.
curiosity, but I know that like I think we all prefer the Japanese version of Advent Children.
Oh,
Absolutely.
definitely.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
not that I don't know. The voice acting was pretty bad for the most part in this, but not bad that the voice actors themselves were all bad.
Right.
A few of them were bad voice actors.
A few of them
but-
reminded me. You guys remember that Final Fantasy VII remake trailer where is it Biggs or
Bi-
Wedge?
It's not Biggs or Wedge. It's
Which one is it?
It's
What's
the
his
other,
name?
the other
I'm
guy.
forgetting.
Fetch.
You're saving the planet.
Yeah, we're saving the planet, right? And he gets on out of
like
there.
Mickey
The
Mouse.
guy with the bandana. What's his name? I'm
Oh,
totally
gosh.
forgetting his name.
Maybe
He's not Biggs or Wedge, really.
there's Biggs and Jesse. Is it just the three of them? I thought there was a fourth member. I guess it is. I guess it is
Barry
Wedge.
Tifa, and then
I guess it's Wedge. So Biggs is
Okay.
the skinny one, Wedge is the fat one, and then Jesse is the other. Those are the three Avalanche members, and then you got Barrett. So yeah, it was Wedge.
Wedge, when that, if you watch it again or if you can remember it, because it's probably the most memorable thing about that trailer to me,
That's how bad
unfortunately.
he was.
And he just had his voice. You see his character, and he's like, hey, he's got that smirk on. He's dressed all sweet. He's a big dude. And then, hey, he sounds like Ralph, Chief Wiggum's kid from
he does
The Simpsons.
He does sound like
Hey,
Simpsons character.
we're saving the planet, right? And he gets on out of there, but he just looks all. It's so funny. But this movie had several moments that felt like that, where it was like you
And
see a character, you haven't
there-
heard him talk yet. He walks into the room and he just
Well,
sounds
the
so
voice doesn't match.
much different. Yeah, he does not sound like what he looks like.
I thought Sean Bean did a good job.
Very,
I thought,
yeah,
though, the way it comes across combined with the character in the animation,
Yeah.
it just doesn't like connect
Yeah.
right. And you don't
and-
just feel it.
I understand why they decided to do that. I understand the reason why they wanted Sean Bean and Lita Haiti and Aaron Paul,
Paul,
so that they could, because you got to be able to sell that to
That's gonna
American
get a lot of
audiences.
people to
It's
go
like,
see it.
These people, I like these people.
Right.
But I from watching this little documentary on the English voice cast from the video game. The King Regis actor, he seemed to really fit the face better to me than Sean Bean did. And again, that is probably just a matter of preparation. Who knows how long Sean Bean sat down with this character and and his voice is great. No matter what he does, it's going to sound awesome.
It sounds very good.
But the other actor, I think, really has immersed himself more.
It's just tough.
It feels that way to me.
It's so tough. Everyone knows Sean Bean's voice. Everyone knows what Sean Bean looks like.
The second he talks,
to hear his voice coming out of anyone who looks real, who doesn't look like him, is going to be unsettling. And it's
if you did facial cap though, it would
have helped.
Yeah.
But it makes me think of
Gollum
Avatar, or even like Gollum, where the movie Avatar, where they actually based the faces off of the people who were the voice actors acting. And there's something about that. Like a lot of Disney films, they've done that too, where like Pocahontas, they made Pocahontas kind of look like
that's
the voice
a good
actors.
point.
Yeah, that's true.
Bringing Avatar up, I don't think Avatar's a great movie.
Did not quite,
but it doesn't.
Did.
But I never for a minute while watching Avatar was disconnected between the face when the face was talking and the animation. Yeah. And in this movie, it was constantly that way.
It's true.
It never felt like it matched the faces with the talking.
It was the main thing that killed the believability. Mm-hmm. I also felt like a lot of the voices did not sound like they belonged in the environment that we were occupying.
I felt that same way.
A lot of the voices sounded like
there was some strange audio mixing. One that comes to mind in particular is I think his name is Arden. He's like the Chancellor character, the guy with the hat.
Yeah.
He's speaking inside of an airship. Kind of in towards the end of the movie, and the reverberation in that room just didn't sound right to me. It was it felt very applied, like an effect rather than natural.
Yeah. Well, I mean, anything that makes you think and go oh wait, how did they do this? Or I mean, it breaks the immersion, and it's not what you want. Because that unfortunately hurts suspension of disbelief a little bit.
Yeah.
And I just think these things are all exaggerated by the characters looking so real, and that's to the credit of the modelers and everything. They look real. They were
too good
except when they move. Yeah. Right. So I remember being at E3 and we saw the posters and things and the little behind the scenes video while we were in line.
Yeah.
And it was wow, man, they look so real,
perfectly real.
Yeah. Like a Crow, the woman, she looks. At least initially, of all the characters, it's bam, wow, she looks so real. Yeah.
The physics too for this, the way they did the hair and everything, it was weird. You can tell that they kind of selectively applied a wind effect in 3D to certain characters to make them show. Like some characters, their hair's just chilling, but then there's one dude, his hair's all wavily as though, and it would take quite a bit of wind to really get your hair to do that, So it's hey. That's weird, right?
Yeah. It's almost
then also there's another shot where they're all lined up and one person's coattails are just blowing like horizontal,
like hurricane wind.
Yeah, exactly, and just blowing as if it was a flag and
that's what I was going to say.
50-mile-an-hour wind.
The physics indicate something large like a flag or a sail catching wind and moving slowly, but it's hair.
But it's this little thing.
You don't see hair going
or it's clothes.
It's if wind hits hair, it's
But the weird thing is, it was selective. It was sometimes they were this would look sweet if if it was all blowing and stuff. Yeah. So for the most part, it was spot on. It's just every now and then it was what is happening?
I mean, you watch a lot of anime and hair they emotes with the character. It really will they're excited or anticipating something. Their hair will
hair
up
changes.
And, and so I'm sure a lot of 3D animators, they start at some point with 2D animation, or at least you have to have those principles. Mm-hmm. So that might be something, how that comes into play. But anyways, so before we get to the spoilers, though, if we're going on a 5-star system,
okay, so we're gonna apply a rating
because we're gonna get these reviews on Rotten Tomatoes, guys. We're gonna get
we gotta up that 7% now. It's at 7.
It's at 7 now. It's true.
By the way, if anybody wants to start a petition to get Rotten Tomatoes taken down because Kingsglaive was reviewed so poorly, send it over and we'll make a joke out of it and we'll get traction behind it.
So before if we're doing a 5-star rating, are we doing halves? Because that's might as well just be 10. Are we just going to say no?
Are we going to do point?
It's just stars because that's what critics do.
Solid 2 or a solid 3, solid 4, like no 4.5s, right?
Let's make it rough. No halves. Let's make it rough.
No
Go
halves.
the whole star.
Okay, you have to go whole star. Okay.
Go full star.
You start
okay, I say at this point in time, I would give it 3 stars. I feel like it's just borderline for me. I did not enjoy the film. I came out of it very much like having enjoyed the ride, so to speak. But it'll be interesting how well it stands up on a second viewing. And there's a lot, like storytelling element wise, like Mike was alluding to, you couldn't be blamed necessarily for not knowing who you should care the most about in the story.
Right.
So that's what I probably do at this point in time. I say 3 stars out of 5.
So I give this rating with the prelude that there are many things I liked in the film. And I think it has, again, a great baseline, a great groundwork, and that makes me excited for the potential of the video game story. But judging this as a film, I think it's a 2 out of 5. I don't think it's a great film.
And then a cup of soda.
And a cup of soda.
We should have been doing bags. 2 bags.
2 bags of popcorn.
3
I
bags.
get 2 bags, 3 bags.
2 bags.
So, as a film, if this was standalone and as what it is, I have to say 2 stars. However, as an hour and a half long prologue cutscene to Final Fantasy 15, I would actually give it 4 stars because that it's fetching sweet, and they even use the word fetching in
they do.
Instead of referring to Noctis,
Yeah.
they're like, he's a fetching...
The fetching young prince
Yeah, which of course it means something
makes
else.
us laugh.
We thought it was funny as
But
fetch. Let us know if you thought it was funny as fetch.
It was just a nice nod to Dark Pixel.
But, so it depends on what we're looking at it as. Is this a film? And obviously, yes, it's a film. 2 stars. Is it freaking a cutscene prologue to a game that has like the sickest, most creative world in it? 4 stars. 4.5. So 4 stars, 4 bags of popcorn and a soda. Yeah. So.
Okay, On Cinema. You guys got to watch On Cinema.
Yeah, go look it up.
On Cinema at the Cinema. Great web series on Adult Swim.
So my overall thoughts, I would actually go with the 4 stars. I'll stick with that as
overall.
far as my pure enjoyment and what
Just
I
for
really
you
think
yourself
of it
and you're
overall.
planning on playing the game.
Exactly.
So
I say that's a 4-star. That was sick. That was a sick cutscene.
nice cutscene. Good job, guys. GG.
GG.
All right, now we're going
right.
to jump into our spoiler thoughts here. So here's the timestamp that you can skip to get past the spoilers into our next
Into our
topic.
3DS
We'll give
Galaxy
you guys
case.
Yeah, skip ahead to the 3DS. So if you don't hear us talking about 3DS or Nintendo, you're not at the right part.
It didn't go far
Well,
enough. Yeah.
But the half linear, half
Oh,
open.
dang, you're right.
Oh shoot, we are still talking about
We will.
15.
We have another Final Fantasy 15.
So it's not going to be the Galaxy.
Okay, sorry.
Not the Galaxy.
It's going to be, we're
We're
talking
gonna be
about the
talking
game
about the
being
game.
half linear, half open world.
Statement from Tabata. Yeah.
Okay, here we go. Non-spoiler, or no, total spoiler.
Spoilers.
Total
Spoiler reviews here.
And here's the biggest spoiler of all: Sean Bean gets iced. He gets iced cold.
No one saw that coming.
Nobody.
No
knew.
one saw that
Biggest spoiler of the whole thing.
Okay, so I guess I'll just kind of start this off, and give some more detail on what I was saying about this kind of like omnipresent sort of point of view for the viewer. So and the story being trying to do too much, like trying to develop too many characters within a limited format. It tells 2 stories. One is that of these refugee characters from the outer territories of the Kingdom of Lucis, who are in the middle of a war. They are actually fighting on the front lines to protect their own homes and their own families and their own people. Mm-hmm. Lucis has been protected by this shield and has been at peace for, did they say 100 years?
It was 100 years
Long
piece.
time.
Yeah.
So the people in that city have no fear of this war. They cannot be infiltrated or penetrated within this shield. So they have nothing to worry about. And they kind of have this thing where like the people from within the city look down on the refugees. They obviously have this sense of pride, this naivety. A lot of like the guards and the military personnel who are on duty within the city, they look down on these other refugee people. Right. They begin to establish this pretty good reason, again, a baseline good reason for these characters of the Kingsglaive that are from the Outer Territories to really despise the royalty and sort of like the government, basically. The start of that is there. Like, you get the sense there's a good reason for them to feel this way, right? If they had stuck with that and really allowed the viewer to see it from that perspective from the whole film, and kind of keep the king and the royalty away from our eyes in the same way that these people wouldn't be allowed to see them except for on like duty or something like that, you get this disconnect, like, oh, these our king doesn't care about us, he only cares about protecting himself and his son, and like this he's and what happens in the film is which is where we switch perspectives to King Regis. They're talking about this basically peace treaty that the Niflheim Empire wants to initiate, which the terms of agreement are, you're going to give us all of these outer territories. They will fall under our rule, but you can keep your city, Insomnia. Like you see very clearly that Regis doesn't particularly have a choice. Like, he doesn't have the strength because his life force is being drained to sustain the shield and to give the power to his army. Like, all their magic that they use is drawn from him.
I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, that's an interesting
and
concept.
you can see it in his face. Like, he's drained, and he's just like, obviously, like,
his eyes have almost no color to them.
Yeah, that's right. They're very light.
He has very weak, and he keeps saying, like, I have the strength to maintain the shield for some years, but I can't launch an offensive. I don't have the ability to do this.
And the film had actually opened up showing basically a war
battle.
lost, like a battle was lost, but Niflheim withdrew when they had the upper hand, and it's like, what the crap's going on? Like, they could have crushed them right
A show of goodwill, they called it. Like, we're not here to just totally crush you, we just want these territories to be ours. Obviously, there's a double motive there.
Yeah.
But in any case, we now see that Regis is attempting to spare lives that don't needlessly need to die by continuing to fight for these territories. He allows them to fall under Niflheim rule to avoid more, casualties, but at the same time wants to maintain at least some of the kingdom as it is, and protect the people that he can protect, which is now just become his own city. So you can see the difficult choice there, and you can also see why that would upset the people from the other territories who have been fighting all this time to protect this
give
stuff.
their lives to fight, but that their homes aren't the ones that ultimately...
But when we see it from King Regis' perspective, I no longer have the same sympathy for the refugee characters, because I get why he did it. And so when they do their betraying and their turning, it's like, yeah, I get you, but I get you, and now I don't know who to side with anymore.
You get more.
Right? Yeah. And then I tend to lean towards Regis because it's Sean Bean, but I mean, that really is the right choice to make.
Right.
I can either let more people die uselessly in a war I can't win, or I let them live under a new sovereign and protect who I can protect. That's the only choice you can make there.
Right. What's interesting is that he can't sustain an attack, right? He doesn't have that power, but perhaps his son does.
Right.
Perhaps his son, and that's why he's so protective of his kid. But the way they all see it is, all he cares about is his kid.
Right.
But if his kid is able to become king and mature,
then he could
completely
restore
the kingdom,
the boundaries and everything.
But like, the other side doesn't quite get it, but we get it. I mean, we see it right there from the beginning, basically.
Well, the only real good hints they give to you is, like, after that initial battle, they go and they're like eating food after the battle.
Yeah.
At like a little pop-up like outdoor restaurant or something. And they're all just talking. And that's like the first time you sort of get a hint at like,
they don't.
This is like a ragtag bunch. And they're being, they're the only ones that have any capacity whatsoever on the side of Lucius to do anything about Niflheim's armies. And even they almost die or do die,
right?
You know, in that effort. So like that was, and here's the thing: the animation comes in. That was such a key scene. I feel like it was a really important one. It was going to be like, now here's who these people really are. Yeah. But I feel like voice acting wise and animation wise, they did not deliver that.
And so
and specifically, felt weird. It felt weird, and specifically, that's the first time you see them not wearing their armor, their Kingsglaive costuming. So they're wearing very normal looking clothes, and it makes them look even more out of place, like even more just wrong. And so I was in that scene too. I think you were saying, Case. It was like, oh, they're talking about the fashion. Like, oh, why are you wearing? Oh, because this is like what I like to wear.
Right.
And I really do wonder if they're like, that was like, we got to work in a little. You can wear different clothes.
You can wear clothes,
and the food.
Whatever you like.
I mean, I don't. That's total speculation there.
Well, they even have a line there because they ordered food that was like a delicacy, or maybe not a delicacy, but you know, it's from their home territory. It's like a food developed by their home territory.
Yeah,
and they didn't make it right. And it's like, well, we're not from Gladio or whatever. This is why the people here like it. So you get some of that, like we're better than the outer territories there. But the voice acting from this character, Libertus, is so bad.
He's bad.
All of this, like what could be really subtle, like good exposition and good setup for a payoff later, is diminished by stiff facial animation that doesn't match the lips and really bad voice acting from everyone other than Aaron Paul.
Yeah.
So it's
which
like,
isn't what I was expecting.
You're distracted from all of this, and again, like this is why I feel so conflicted about it, because like all of the pieces are here for a really great story. It's just the techniques, acting, cinematography, animation, like all of these techniques coming together into a whole that are not done well. Like individual pieces, parts of things are good. Like Aaron Paul's acting is good, but not the other characters. The animation's really great, except for in the face. The writing is really great in some places, and too obvious, too like
explicit, almost.
Explicit
like this
in others. It's a lot of telling instead of showing.
Yes.
If you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, talking about that scene where they're eating that food, specifically, like first off, what they're eating, at least the Japanese equivalent of it, is very much like a working man's cheap food that you just go after your hard blue collar, day at the job, and you're drinking and eating like that. That's what that type of stuff is. So that's telling us at least something about these guys, right? But then, but the worst part about that scene to me is how Libertus was saved by Nyx earlier. Right? Yeah. Like he saved his life. Libertus gets pinned under a rock, so now his leg's crushed, and he doesn't have his sword knife thingy, boomerang knife, whatever, to like teleport out of there. So Nyx was given an order to retreat, and he goes, "No, I'm going back and I'm saving Libertus." So he goes back, and it's crazy, and he saves him. And then we get to this scene, and Libertus is like, "Yeah, whatever." And I get it if you're trying to show Libertus is I don't know, like afraid to show emotion or something.
But he's not. But he's a purely emotionally driven character.
It's true. All his decisions are emotionally driven.
Except he's
like, yeah, whatever. That's just part of our deal, man. We just don't ever thank each other for stuff.
I know.
I guess, but it makes it feel like he's ungrateful. So like, screw you, dude.
Right.
Yeah.
In that moment, it's like, I don't like you.
Don't like him already. Yeah. It's not good. And
a lot of his decisions are pretty suspect. I think they're pretty weird.
A great example of like the way that this movie tells instead of shows, which is the biggest problem again with this like split in what we show. We develop these royalty characters, and we are developing these Kingsglaive as like two separate perspectives of events, and the emotional payoffs don't land for either side because there's not enough time given to show their relationships. They just tell us that you're like a sister to me. Is what Libertus says to Crow.
That's like the only time,
but we never
that's like the second scene they're even together.
We never see or get a real sense from the way they interact that they have that relationship. And if we want to believe that, time needs to be given to develop that. But instead of developing that, they're developing King Regis and Luna Freya and all this other stuff.
And then they'll just have him say that.
Right.
Say you're like a sister. Now the people understand.
If this were a television series, you could develop that over the course of many episodes. This can be, a 20-hour story. But this is an hour-and-a-half story. Right. You don't have time to do both things. And you got to pick one or the other.
And the reason why that this is such an issue is because Crow dies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
She is sent on a mission and somehow gets taken out. She's killed. And Libertas, this is like a pivotal moment for his character, where he decides to completely do a 180,
right,
and work against the king, basically,
right.
But
and the groundwork is there for him to have a legitimate reason to do that.
So it's important to show, or we're not going to get that as much. So it's not just like, oh, I don't believe these people are good friends. It's like, no, this is a motivation for later on, right? It's not like you don't believe their friendship. It's like you don't believe him deciding to become a terrorist, essentially,
because of this,
because they just didn't show it.
We didn't really feel how close he was to her.
So it's like, okay, I get at face value. You said, and he's saying he's very sad.
Yeah, and
cool, but I don't feel sad.
Again, that's why some of the dialogue doesn't land for me, because it's a lot of telling. Like, he's talking about how he met her for the first time, and like, oh, those eyes, damn those eyes, and it's show me that moment.
Right.
Show
seriously.
it to me.
That
Don't tell me. It means so much more when I can see it and feel it, rather than you just telling me and him on the brink of tears.
Right.
I can't feel that impact because I don't have any sense of what that felt like for him, other than him just telling me what it feels like.
And even worse so, that he's not a great voice actor.
No, and he's not a good actor.
So when it comes to, we'll tell him rather than show, understand that telling is not convincing with this specific cast.
Yeah.
No, unfortunately, you have to not avoid telling as much as you can.
And with Nyx, the main character, they like very, very subtly set up something. He's just having these like voice flashbacks.
He'll hear something.
He'll hear something that reminds him of something.
Or
and then later in the movie, the resolution
falling.
of this, he says, yeah, my sister died, and I knew you'd save her. And so you realize, my motivation, I'm telling you, my motivation all the time is to provide a good future for people like I couldn't do for my sister. But
that's at the end of the film.
I didn't see that. I don't know what your relationship is with her. I can't feel any of this. There's no emotional impact because I didn't get to see it. You just told me it.
I was going to say that, like, that scene, him with his sister and showing what went down, would have been awesome to open the movie with.
Yes.
Instead, we open the movie with with Noctis, King Regis, and Luna.
Girl.
Is a little girl, and her essentially going, nope, never mind, I'm staying here.
Yeah.
Okay. So now she's with Niflheim, and then so a huge part of the plot at this point, where we are now, 12 years after that incident, involves her and why she's with them and every. But what's so awful about that is it's like, as the greater plot arc goes, as it connects to Final Fantasy 15, it's obviously more important to know, like, the relationship of Noctis, Luna, and King Regis.
Right.
But for the movie, it would be far more useful and effective to know the relationship of Nyx and his sister.
Right.
Yeah.
If you're going to have those characters. Otherwise, you make the movie about the royalty.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's what they set up at the beginning, was the story of the royalty.
It's like, oh, look.
And in the larger picture of the story of Final Fantasy 15, that's the one we need to know.
Right.
Yeah.
We need to know the story of the royalty and the fall of this kingdom. We don't need to know the story of the Kingsglaive characters. But they're trying to tell the story of the Kingsglaive characters. So pick one or the other and tell that story. Or make two movies.
That's where
whatever.
the fence is where this movie is totally straddling the fence, and it doesn't satiate either side.
No.
Because they're trying so hard to, we're not showing Noctis. They made the decision from the beginning, we are not showing what Noctis is doing at all. Not a single scene. Until you wait after the credits. Then you get one scene where Noctis is literally just being talked at and didn't actually do anything.
And it's straight out of the where Final Fantasy 15 opens up with the car breaking down.
Yeah. The car breaking down. Basically leads right to the beginning.
But they're straddling. So the game is about Noctis. The history is about how the city fell and the regents and his family. But we've got Aaron Paul here.
And that's what's unfortunate.
It's so confusing.
Aaron
and honestly,
Paul was the best of the characters you saw frequently. He was the best voice actor.
Yes,
yeah, I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting like Aaron Paul. Like I don't think he's ever done voice work.
Yeah,
so I mean, usually you know you're not going to do super awesome at that your first crack at it, but I think he did a really good job. Yeah. Of all the voices and faces, his worked.
His matched the best.
His matched Nick's.
Maybe the woman too, Luna.
Yeah. I guess that would have to do with how much you have or haven't watched Game of Thrones. I haven't watched a lot of Game of Thrones, but I've heard a lot of people complaining that it's like really weird to hear Lena Headey's voice coming out of
in
a
good way
character who's very innocent.
Oh, that's funny.
And it's like, no, she's supposed to be this devious, like...
You know what's weird, though, is that if they did just pick Aaron Paul's character and just make the story just about him, sure, the movie would be better, but we would be missing a huge part when we play the game far as the kingdom.
Certainly.
So it's like... They were trying to do two different things, and they're completely at odds. And like they're trying to, create something that's not there. So when we say, "Oh, Aaron Paul's character should have been the main character of the whole story," that's from the whole film's perspective. That would have made the story so much better. But the story is about Noctis, even though this film has very little to do with Noctis, I guess.
Yeah.
I think
the story is Final Fantasy 15, and in that sense, they got way over their heads as far as trying to make everything connected in this prologue.
It's true. Trying to make too many things connect, probably, instead of avoiding the showing a story of something that happened in a greater event without explaining the whole event.
Yeah.
I think that in context of the video game, and if this is meant to set up the video game, that the right choice, in my opinion, would have been to follow the story of King Regis and the royalty.
Yep.
But because there's one character they don't explore, and that's kind of like King Regis's right-hand man. And they obviously have a history together.
Yes,
he was a very minor character.
Used to fight with.
He could have been this like smaller connection with the Kingsglaive. Like he could have been like their commander or whatever. So you could have gotten all that Kingsglaive kind of action.
Exactly, because the king was not on the battlefield.
Right, but so you have a perspective of a character who is loyal to the king and who is a part of the royalty to make the story about that, but still have this like Kingsglaive Elite force and all this awesome action you can do in the movie.
And that's honestly that's what they were trying to do. That's why Aaron Paul's character even exists, I think, is because they're like, oh shoot, we got to show all the action, so let's make a dude and follow him for 50%. And if it was somebody like the king's right-hand man, that would have been perfect. You should have been You should have been on the writing team.
It's true. It's like adding too many layers. It's adding too many layers. Like why you have more characters than you needed.
Yeah.
And of course you want to make it seem like this is a court and there's distance between the royalty and the okay.
They're not
one
allowed.
of the worst scenes in the entire thing is when Nyx is like, I'm going to talk to the king.
And he just like blows past all the guards.
There's guards that are like, stop. And these guards have been in a scene. What makes it even worse, in a scene, not just like 2 minutes prior, one of the captain of the guards said, neutralize any threat, anything.
Yeah.
Like basically no matter what. Basically like you can kill people if you need to. We're keeping this under control. Yeah. And then 2 minutes later, we watch a guy just walk past these guards, and they're hey man, stop! Hey, stop! And he doesn't just do it once.
They don't. He does like 3 times. They just let him go. They
even the guards at the gates to the freaking King's Court, basically.
Yeah. And you brought up a good point while we were watching it. Is like I thought he was going to use his knife power to like work past him. If they had been trying to stop him, they don't use magic. These are just normal guards.
Yeah, they're
they're not the elite Kingsglaive. They don't have that ability. So if they're all trying to stop him, they're trying to kill him maybe even. And he's just goes right into the king's room like, listen, we need to deploy right now. That would have been really sick.
Yeah, it would have made more sense.
It was really stupid because he's just like walking past them and just pushing him out of the way. And they're like, oh, like, never mind.
And it's not like he has superhuman strength. He has this ability to use magic.
Right. Yeah.
Which the movie has alluded to only certain people could tap into, and they were selected because they showed potential. But yeah, and then he gets in there. Oh, yeah, I'm at the king. Like, what kind of... And then
the king's like, oh,
so it's like, so you guys had no way to get information up the chain of command,
I guess not.
or whatever,
because he was trying to talk to the captain.
The captain
which is the captain was
a
mole.
Bad.
Yeah,
so that's fine, but like, let him use his cool abilities to get in there. Don't just push past all the guards trying to stop him.
So that was pretty dumb. But the marriage of Luna and Noctis, which is like sounds to be like at the crux of Final Fantasy 15 itself, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's like why he's with these 3 guys. And it's initially it's like he was sent out to keep him out of the way of stuff.
See, and the way I originally understood it, I thought he was going to her kingdom.
I thought so too.
But it seems like, no, this has been a place chosen by Regis to get them out somewhere safe in Altissia. Mm-hmm. Apparently, Altissia might be a free kingdom that I don't know for sure, but is out of the influence of both Lucius and Niflheim. To like go there, get married, and live your lives away from this stuff.
To keep for that whole protection,
and until Noctis is ready to come back and fix the problem.
Right,
but
because
go get the crystal.
I mean, jumping around a lot, but King Regis has a ring.
Yeah.
This ring is really important. It is some tie to the Lucii.
The Lucii, the previous kings.
Previous kings that are essentially almost like ascended guardians of some. It made me think of Mulan, actually, when they're talking to the ancestors.
Yeah.
And they're like having the arguments with each other.
Yeah.
So he has this, which is significant, and we see that several other people try to take it and put it on.
They refer to the new wall and the old wall.
The new wall
is the crystal. The crystal is like at the center of the citadel, and it generates
projecting the shield.
And that is taking its power from the king himself. Like his life force is powering that crystal that
so the king
generates the shield.
The king is what is
but the ring is an old wall, basically like an older power that's been sealed in there that's forbidden and that like almost nobody can use. Like only people deemed worthy by the old Lucian kings can use this power.
Yeah,
and that's where
I'm
assuming the magic is coming from. All the magic that the characters are using is coming from the power of this ring.
And so that ring, Noctis is important, not just because he's the king's son, but because literally he's of the blood, and that is important to these guardians.
Right.
They explicitly say at one point when Nyx puts on the ring, they're like, "You are not of the royal blood. What the crap are you doing here?"
Yeah.
And to the point where even though he was as worthy as he could have possibly freaking been to have been awarded whatever, they're still like
the price was his life.
Yeah, and they're still like you. But that blood issue is so super important to them. So you can see why Noctis is so important, because he is of the king's blood, and so that comes into play.
And given that
why he needs to be protected,
these dudes are of the royal blood. It's kind of like if they're the gods or whatever. If they're people who just kind of care about the kingdom, I could totally see them like forgoing the whole you don't have to be royal. But these people are very partial. They are of that blood. They were the former kings, and so they're like, to let somebody in, it's very personal to them.
Yeah.
So that decision makes a little more sense. But I'm confused that Nyx goes around, does his thing. He has the ring still, right?
Oh, when he's fighting at the end.
Yeah. And he's with, and I guess
no,
you're
right.
Die.
He gave it to her after he put
That's
it
right,
on.
he did. He still had the powers, though.
They gave him
the powers.
And then he gave the ring to
Maybe
Lunafreya,
that's what I'm so confused about.
Left.
So there's the crystal.
Similar to how...
took the crystal. The crystal's powered by the ring, though, so it's not
I don't know if the crystal's powered by the ring.
Is it not?
I think the crystal is powered by the life force
shield
of the king. Like the king's life itself.
So
is
why
what
did they need the
crystal
crystal then? Because the king's dead.
Remember the scene where the emperor said, or where Regis says to the emperor, like, you cannot use this crystal.
Right.
It's like,
he's
you
like, I don't
can't
care.
either if I take it from you.
But
the entire
if you kill
point,
him, then
the entire point is to take that power away from the king.
And that was fine, except they killed the king. So
then it made it.
Well, there would be if they were to leave the crystal in the kingdom,
like a second
the son
king?
could come and he could begin power.
So the crystal.
So they're trying to take that power completely away from them.
Yeah. So
even if he can't use it,
right.
So we did see that pivotal scene, of course, the death scene for Sean Bean's character, where he. I hate it in movies when someone's like, "Yeah, I could go with you, but like,
but
I'm gonna stay here and die, and now I'm not going to be any use to anybody." Maybe he thought he could kill the guy.
Well, I understand it more for him because he's disabled almost. Like he can hardly walk. His leg is in a brace. He's like limping everywhere, and he's obviously just completely weakened.
The character that for me it felt weird, all the choices, was Luna Freya. Like,
Yeah.
I know. I don't like the way she was written.
I get that you want to empower women these days, like that you want them to be able to take initiative and have their own, decisions and not just follow what the men are telling them to do. Like, I get the issue there. This is not the right way to do it.
This movie did that very poorly.
Because she just says no to all the very sensible things, logical, reasonable things to do. Because, no, I feel like I should do this. And then she goes to do that thing, and it's just like, that is the dumbest possible choice you could make in this moment. That will do no good. And now you're going to have to be saved by the guy anyways. So the scene I'm talking about at first is they're in an airship, like flying through the city, and she's like, I don't want to leave with you. I want to go in there and help the king. Which
She's
is
with
like,
Nyx.
is an emotional thing. I want to help the king. And it's like, are you not like witnessing what's happening here? It's falling apart. You can't save the situation here. And we're going too fast in this airship. She's talking about jumping out of an airship moving hundreds of miles an hour to land on a platform and go into the citadel. And he's like,
A skyscraper.
No,
It's very high up.
you can't
Huge.
do that. You can't. This is Final Fantasy. You can survive falls of any height in Final Fantasy.
You can.
But
you shouldn't.
you understand what I mean. You shouldn't be able to jump out of a moving plane, basically, and land on a platform and just go run in there. And then when she gets in there, what's she going to do? She can't fight. She has no powers.
Actually, that was the weird thing to me. I expected
what she's
her
gonna
character
do to
to,
happen.
I thought she
to
was
have
gonna
some
fight.
ability
Nope.
to do something.
She's like, I'm protecting the king, and she just kind of gets up to him and gives him a hug, and it's like,
And in the
you
game,
need to leave.
in the
Get
in
outta
the
here.
trailers for the game, they show her like facing off against the name of the summon, like Leviathan.
Oh,
And she's got
really?
like a staff, and I figured she'd have some sort of
I
summoning
know.
ability
I
or
thought
something.
she could do
She can
something.
fight.
But in this movie, she has no ability.
She can't do anything.
So I have no idea what she was planning on doing to help in the situation.
No.
But she makes that decision based on no logic or rationality whatsoever, and she jumps out, and Nyx has to like abandon his airship and go warp and save her from dying.
And then there's
But she
one
was
of
right,
the worst
so-
lines. She basically had said something about how like
Miracles.
oh
or
crap,
something,
no,
right?
miracles can happen without magic or something along those
right.
lines, right?
Yeah.
And then she jumps out, and then he saves her
Has
by
to use
teleporting
magic
up,
to
uses
save
magic, and he's like, magic just made that miracle happen.
No, he said you can thank.
You can thank magic for that.
because it's like, oh, thank magic. The way people say
Like in South Park.
exactly, like thank
thank
science,
science.
or anyways.
Yeah, and then so he said, yeah, you thank magic for
Thank
making that
magic
miracle
for
happen.
this, yeah.
And then later,
so
there's
funny.
like a parallel line to that later, because when the king
geez.
is killed, nobody can use their magic anymore.
Yes, he's
Which
no
is
longer
interesting. I'd
powerful.
like to know what the whole like how that was passed to like when they were selected as candidates or whatever for the Kingsglaive. But so anyways, he doesn't have his magic, and then what even happened?
He was driving that like car.
Yeah.
thing, and
it
went
got
like
wedged
in
between the buildings.
and then he jumped through the window
a floor
and escaped
then,
it.
Yeah, and
A
then
really
he's like,
crazy
oh, wow,
action sequence.
maybe you don't need magic to.
Not all miracles are
Not
made
all
with magic.
miracles
Yeah.
are made with magic.
Really,
There were a lot of moments
really
like
bad,
that, though.
like
It's like
one-liner,
a lot
kind
of bad one-liners.
things like
we
that.
get it, dude. We get it.
So dumb.
Yeah,
Yeah.
really
So
stupid.
dumb. That's like those are the kinds of things that make you feel a little embarrassed, and you shift in your seat, and you're like, "Hey, I'm watching this movie.
Well, because it takes a serious moment and makes a joke out of it, and
Trust me, this is cool."
I don't know.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of like you do need humor to break things up a little bit.
Let me
They're
come
not
back to that
constantly
because that's a
doing
good
it,
point.
though.
Let me come back to that in just a second. The other example of Luna being just an idiot is at the end of the movie. She's with Libertas, and he's going to drive her to Altissia, the place she's supposed to go to meet Noctis, and she's just like, "Nah, I'm going to walk there."
I have a feeling.
I feel like I shouldn't
Yeah.
travel with you. And not necessarily in those words, but essentially, I mean, there's no
Basically,
reason.
she's saying it would be a good idea.
It would be a
Right.
better idea for me to walk in public as the princess of Tridea or wherever she's from, with
she's
everyone
still
being able
got
to
her
recognize
white
me, including
dress.
Niflheim. I'll just walk there, totally
With
suspect
the
and
ring.
vulnerable,
Yeah,
with the ring,
That's right.
Like this most important
instead of
thing.
having you drive me there. Like, what the fetch? That is the dumbest
And
thing
the guy's
I've
like,
ever
yeah,
seen.
you're probably right.
Like, what the heck,
Not
man?
to mention that scene now, that involved Libertas, who's such a crap character.
Speaking of emotionally based decision-making characters, Libertas, this is one of the things where, like, they show, like, one or two things, and it's like, okay, now he can be bad, but then all of a sudden, okay, you know in Star Wars Episode 3, how Anakin, like, in the course of, like, a week, becomes the greatest, darkest, evil Sith Lord ever, and he was like, not really. I mean, they gave tiny hints every now and then, like the joke of, why do I feel you're going to be the death of me, Anakin? Okay, I would never kill you, and, like, stuff like that, you know? But it's like, anyways, that's how this movie feels very much so. How quickly Anakin turned is how quickly Libertas turned. But not only, it's kind of forgivable because we don't know what's been going on in his life up to that point.
Right.
And this
If we had
girl
seen
he really
that-
liked died. So
If we had seen that, it would have been okay.
But his turn, how quickly he turned back
Again.
is like, dude, okay. Because it's been hours. It's been hours in this world.
Because he joined the Resistance.
He joined the
which consisted
Resistance.
of like 6 people.
6 people who are apparently planted bombs or
Who
something.
apparently had connections with Niflheim.
They were with Niflheim, exactly. So he, like, joins Niflheim.
But he
He's
doesn't,
cool with
he doesn't
that.
realize
He doesn't know.
Right. And then he comes back, and now he's fighting for the right side again. But that, like, if it wasn't enough for him to have switched once based on, like, a something that happened that we didn't quite understand the significance of, it was even more to have it happen
back around
twice.
again. Yeah.
And it was like in that second he sees Nix, I guess.
Yeah.
And then he sees the captain, and he's like, "Fetch this! I'm going to." That's when he made that moment, and it was just it didn't. None of his decisions took any thought.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, he's very, like you're saying, he's very emotional
Very.
character,
Yeah.
very impulsive, but poorly acted, which doesn't work for emotional characters.
Right. Totally.
You know, it would work fine if he was just a cold, calculated whatever. But he's supposed to show emotion, and it's just not totally believable the whole time. So it's
Here's the other weird thing. All the references to older Final Fantasies. So Diamond Weapon is in it, and that was actually pretty well done. Like that fit in with, like, the mech motif of Niflheim. A weapon, like a robot weapon that they deploy. Works. Ultros, which is like a squid monster from Final Fantasy VI,
That's right.
is in this movie for no reason other than to be a reference. Other people will say, "Oh, that's Ultros. I loved that game."
okay. So they're saying like, "Oh, it's a trap. It's a trap, right?" And then, but what ends up springing the trap was Ultros' tentacle arm grabbing somebody, and fetching him up. Not one of the guards that were even there. So I was like, was that part of your plan? You're going to have Ultros on the ship.
Was to have in a totally mech-oriented society. They used a squid octopus monster on one of their airships to, like, spring a trap again. It just doesn't fit, and it makes no sense whatsoever. You can't control a monster squid.
Out of place.
Like, it had no reason for being there other than for people to go, "Oh my gosh, it's Ultros." And
then just get rid of
And
them,
I
like,
must
just
say,
quickly.
it's already far too obvious what they're doing with the character, a character of Arden Izulia. He's the Chancellor of the Emperor. That's Kefka. And the same
he
exact
definitely
thing.
has
The
that.
same exact thing is going to happen. He's gonna overthrow the Emperor and try to take over. Like, it's too.
You can kind of
that
see
parallel
that.
with Final Fantasy VI is
towards the end.
too obvious. We already know what's going to happen. However, the thing I like about Arden is he's not quite as over the top as Kefka is. He's not quite as just, like, loopy and crazy. He's got this kind of cold calculation to him, and he's
does still
flamboyant.
sound weird,
He's
yeah.
flamboyant, and he speaks in this flowery language. And he's got that, like, element of Kefka to him, but he's also a much more intimidating character, I think, than Kefka is. If he were, when you see him realized in, like, Dissidia or something, and you hear his voice, and he's like, "Woo, woo, woo."
how was this guy ever?
Yeah.
Clown, man.
In any case, but I do think that that's too obvious. Like, if they betray my expectation with that, I'll be very happy. But I'm like 99% certain what's going to happen there.
Reminds me. So the scene. Okay, so they're supposed to be signing this treaty. The king and the emperor are going to sit next to each other and sign this treaty at the table, right? And that whole scene where
That seems actually cool. Where
that
he's
was
like,
really interesting.
Somebody
Yeah.
kidding.
They're talking back and forth, and so what had happened was
if you see nothing of that movie, watch it.
That was a great scene. That was a great scene.
Luna was not there, and they received intel that she wasn't there, and she was supposed to be there, and so they know that something's up, and then they're like, oh, they've got this fleet out here, so they don't trust us, but it's like, okay, we don't trust them either, and then so they send off the Kingsglaive to go and rescue her, because she had a tracking thing in her hairpin, and so they knew where she was, because Nix had just so happened to give the hairpin to her at a party where he was her bodyguard,
but Niflheim was using it.
It was from Lucius. Like, remember that Crow had that originally?
Yeah,
but you're right. Niflheim ended up tracking it.
The robots were
the robots tracked it later.
And so that's like who anyway.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but at that party where he's like, here, you were supposed to have this thing, and we had basically a secret agent who was supposed to meet up with you and give you this thing. And then there's this whole exchange about she would have really wanted you to have this. And I think that's how he phrased it, right? It's like she would have wanted you to,
because she's dead, and it's like she's like expressing I don't know, like
sympathies, I guess.
How do you say apologies? Like, she's almost apologizing for her having to die trying to contact her or whatever.
Right.
Yeah. And he's saying as consolation, like, no, take this. She would have wanted you to have it. It was like, it's like that was her job to
that
give
was
it
her
to
whole
you.
mission.
Point.
It wasn't like her thing. It wasn't like, here's this thing for my grandma. It's really important.
It's sentimental. This thing is an heirloom that I'm passing to you. She would have wanted you to have it. It's like this was
yours.
Her mission was to give this thing to you.
Like the mailman showing up.
Yeah, exactly.
And being like, I'm really attached to this, but
this is the letter from your grandmother. She would have wanted you to have it. Take it.
And he's like crying. Like, I don't want to be separated from this envelope, but
that's not mine. It never was. It's pretty.
So there's a lot.
Interesting.
That scene, though, that was definitely a highlight with the King Regis and the Emperor talking with each other, and it's basically almost talking in code. Exactly. But they've got their own like aides coming up on the side, kind of telling them things like,
updating them on the situation.
Yeah, and they're also. But the most unbelievable part of that was that they were broadcasting this live on TV. And
that was kind of weird.
Like, not that that's unbelievable, but the people outside are just like,
I know.
Yeah. Like, everyone's pumped about this.
Like,
I would have believed it more if it was everyone's just sitting there watching, just like what's going to happen.
Exactly.
The future's uncertain.
That's what would like
instead it's like
the case.
Yes,
like, people just pumping.
Yeah. They're literally like, yeah.
Like you watch like the inauguration of President Obama or something. Like I guess the people there were cheering and clapping, but
right.
Like everybody watching it on TV.
This I would equate more to the recent, well, not recent, it was like 4 or 5 years ago, but the royal wedding in England of Prince William and Kate Middleton. Anyways, this is kind of like media coverage in that regard, where it's this royal
the wedding
ceremony.
was supposed to happen.
You cheer at the moment that the thing is signed, at the moment that the president is sworn in, at the moment that they say,
not even a cheer. It's like a.
You clap or whatever, but not like, they're walking up to the treaty. They're gonna sign it.
But
oh my god,
that's like the hype of like the wedding or something. Like, I don't know. It's just so weird the way they did that.
Yeah, that was. I mean, there are little elements of that feel like kind of off. But I mean, that scene as a whole is one of the better scenes, especially when King Regis freaking like busts out his magic, because the Emperor is like, "I'm going to shoot you."
Yeah,
which is a little weird to like ordinarily wouldn't be the,
especially when it's being broadcast.
Live,
and everyone's
like, "Hey, by the way, I'm going to freaking murder you now," and on TV.
Yeah. But King Regis busting out and like all the magic. Swords
appear, and I love that how they animate like the glass. There's all that glass that kind of just like floats.
It's almost a little weird chromatic aberration, and just like I feel like it's
very cool look to it.
And then from that point on is where things really get nuts in the movie, right? A lot of action,
everything. The whole city starts getting destroyed, as cities do in movies these days.
Yeah. You got that. You got that foreshadowing. Oh, I don't want to be around to see what happens at night. However, they do stick around the whole effing night and watch everything that happens. So I don't know why he's like, finally, let's get out of here. We don't want to be here to see the horrors of the night. But then they just watched the Emperor and
then all the monsters come in.
But and that's when the movie gets completely insane, though, because you have Nix, who's trying to escort Luna with the ring that's been given to them by King Regis, who is now dead. And so they're running around, but she kind of gets cornered by a guy. If you're not worthy and you put the ring on, basically you like burn to death and like you disintegrate. So she convinces a guy who had cornered her to put the ring on and everything, and then it gets to this point where Nyx puts the ring on, and he gets to confront the Guardians or whatever, and everyone else who had done that had died. So it was basically like he didn't have a choice. Quickly. I think he had just been shot too. Right? Like twice.
Yes, by a hollow point
bullet, apparently.
That shred your body.
Yeah. So,
very nice.
So, they're like, you're not of royal blood, you can't do this. But he's like, oh, don't you want to like protect the city? You're just gonna sit here and whatever. Like, but they're like, humans just suck. Like, they just like don't even know what's going on. And then he has that moment where it's like, well, okay, you could he had the spirit of a hero or whatever, but it was like choose a life to sacrifice to like basically gain this power, and he gets to make a choice. And then they show, because it's like time to slow down, right? And then they show Luna, and then they show Libertas, who was like,
it's like, who cares? Kill that guy at this point.
Yeah, the thing is, Libertas had just saved Nyx's life, so
right.
Anyways, And then so that's where they're like, okay, well, he's like, yeah, I'm not choosing either of these guys. And of course, we're all sitting here going like, okay, cool. That was really the test, right?
That was the test, yeah.
He passed it, right? But no, fetch you, get out of here. Yeah, there was fine, you're not serious about this. And then he's like, well, screw this. Like, you're not serious about this. And he basically...
he tries to, like, game them, which is, again, stupid because it just makes them look stupid. But he's like, oh, you're going to lose your ring. So, whatever. And they're like, whoa, are you trying to bargain for your life?
Yeah.
I'm not trying to bargain for your life. I'm telling you, this fetching ring.
They're going to take it.
They're going to take it.
How much do you care?
Yeah.
And then he's like, okay, I guess we'll give you the power, but you got to die afterwards.
Only until, like, sunrise. Right. So, you got that countdown. And that's when he comes out. He blows the fetch out of the freaking general dude who was actually his commander.
Yeah.
Who had betrayed them.
The captain. Yeah.
And again,
the captain.
I feel like the groundwork, the ground motivation makes sense for these characters to betray. It doesn't, like, I don't feel sympathy for them because I saw the other side of it the whole movie. So it's like, this betrayal means nothing, like, in this moment. Yeah. And
that's
it's
true.
Like, it's just...
Also, he was one of the worst voice acted characters as well.
Yeah.
I felt like the first time I heard his voice, it was like that.
The captain's voice does not sound like a commander or a military type at all.
It doesn't match his presence. It didn't. It was wrong.
And then they try to make him more intimidating by just pitching his voice down when he's in the armor.
When he's got the armor.
And that's just that
sounds cheap. That
feels cheap.
It's hard
to
to understand him.
Like, we'll make you sound intimidating. This person who doesn't sound intimidating, doesn't sound like a military type by just pitching your voice down. Instead of just picking a very aggressive voice to begin with.
Yeah. Make it sound maybe metal or a little hollow sounding or something.
Right. As if there's the space.
Because he's wearing a freaking mask over his whole face. But yeah, so I'm trying to... Oh, yeah, that's where the movie gets completely bonkers, though. Because now Nyx has this fight with the powers of King Regis, but Nyx is very able-bodied. So it's like he's wielding things very well. He can put up shields that are... actually able to stop stuff, and so they're fighting now, and it's like a little bit after that the Empire brings back in a freaking
the
diamond weapon again.
Oh yeah.
So they're like airlifting it into the city, and it's just like what's weird is like they don't have the ring, but they basically got what they wanted for the most part, but they're still just gonna destroy everything.
They're still going at it.
Yeah, what are they trying to do with diamond weapon? Because they do want that ring. They got the crystal. They do want that ring. So they're sending a huge mech to blow like buildings up and fetch.
You can bury
like,
the
how is
ring,
it? Yeah, how is that? It's going to make your job harder, if anything else. You're gonna bury the people who have it, and then spend weeks trying to excavate and probably never find them in the rubble.
Yeah. So it's so it seemed like that was the catalyst for these guardian statues that we'd seen throughout the movie to like activate. Or turn on, and they appeared to me to be the guardians that he was speaking with.
Yeah, there was the one
with the flat head.
That one.
That was kind of like that samurai looking thing to it. Yeah, that one.
So,
he was the one that threw. He kept the stone statue kept throwing that huge,
which was freaking.
I thought that was cool.
Yeah,
really cool.
Seeing something that
really
big,
cool.
Because we're talking, I don't know what these things, several 100 foot tall, giant
monuments, basically.
Yeah, like monuments. huge.
And that's part of what Mike's talking about when he was saying that the magic feels very unified. Everyone's not doing different things. Even the giant godlike guardians that are become animated from being statues, they're doing the exact same magic.
They're all drawing their power from the same
source. You can tell it's like there's an ancient origin to all of this.
Exactly.
It's very unified.
And that's really cool. Like, as much as it's sweet to have like water, fire, and everyone's doing everything else, but it's really cool to have everyone doing similar things, especially when the enemy's doing something different.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Very well realized visually, I think. All the magic, all the effects in that way.
There's a game we played on the stream, and I can't remember what it was called, and it was about 3 months ago, and we streamed it, and it was for the PS3, and it was basically the same story. You start out as a dude, you have some special qualities, and you're in this big, huge battle, and you're fighting.
Oh, no, I understand. That was Xbox 360.
Was it 360?
You're talking
Mistwalker
about
game.
Mistwalker. That's a company.
No, that's the company.
Lost Odyssey.
Lost Odyssey. That's what I'm talking about. Does this not feel a lot like at least the first 2 or 3 hours?
Yeah,
because there's that fusion of the
battle.
tech and the...
You're you're like not a refugee, but you're not from here. You're looked down upon. You come in, you got the special abilities. Everybody dies. You're like getting jacked. You go back and the king is high up. And
totally. I can see
you have that whole political thing happening, but you're kind of like,
oh,
screw
definitely
this.
a lot of similarities there.
I felt, and that's funny knowing that is Mistwalker, by the way.
Yeah.
Because that's
exactly.
But I didn't even know that at the time. I was just remembering that this is very similar to that. But also, this is like kind of like a mix between Nausicaa, Valley of the Wind, and like Attack on Titan, kind of. Like you've got the useless battle
wall
against the monsters outside the wall, but you're safe in the wall, right?
Yeah.
And that whole concept, I don't know how long ago Final Fantasy 15 had this kind of thing nailed down. Attack on Titan aired the manga was written like 5-6 years ago. But and then obviously Nausicaa, if you guys have ever seen that Miyazaki film,
it's a really good one.
It's trying to parallel nuclear weapons, but with the monsters coming in, and anyways, just really
ancient monsters that
you
the
can
army
see
is using
exactly. You can see the inspirations. I feel like for this film, the problem is it was done so much better in the Nausicaa and even Attack on Titan, even though we don't know how it resolves yet. And even Lost Odyssey was like freaking cool. That was a game, so gotta give him a pass on that one. But you can see a lot of things that they drew from, and it's really cool, especially in the artwork and things. And that's where they nailed it the most. But meshing it all together with the story, I guess, became a little bit difficult.
Yeah. Well, like we were talking about before, I almost got the sense that the giant monsters, essentially the Guardians or whatever, battling at the end was almost like that's what they wanted to have happen, and I feel like because that's all the backdrop almost of Nyx and the general. What the crap his name is? I don't even think of his name. General something.
They all have very obscure Latin names. It's hard to remember.
It's hard to remember, but they're fighting.
Funny. By the way, the refugees have Germanish sounding last names, and then the main people have Latin kind of sounding names. Did you guys notice that?
Yeah, that's true.
Like
that's
the King Regis and everything, but the Noctis is very, well, actually that could maybe be Latin, but it's very German sounding.
But yeah,
sorry, he's not a refugee, but still.
But that fight, they have them fighting like on these Guardians as the Guardians are fighting the diamond weapon. And kind of like failing, which was actually kind of cool. It was giving a sense of scale very much to like how powerful this thing is. But it was a little crazy. Jumping off of them and fighting.
It's so chaotic,
on top of them.
and again, the camera choices I think are poor in a lot of spots, and it's just very hard to follow the action.
Yeah, you're just like, well, whatever the end result was, I take your word for it.
Yeah, that's exactly what I said in my head for a lot of things. It's like. I don't know how that happened, but I guess what I watched led to that conclusion. I guess what I watched led to that guy dying, or led to that whatever. Like I believe you. Whatever. Let's continue. Not clearly understanding like how we got from A to B.
Yeah.
And this is the climax of the film. We're at the end. Nyx and the captain guy general fighting each other, and then they're having a conversation the whole time about like I'm fighting for the lands that I come, my home or whatever. And what are you fighting for?
Right.
And it goes back and forth like that for a while, which is a little weird.
Gotta have their philosophy,
Yeah, like why are you fighting? Well, that's not a good reason. You fight for why I
They
fight.
have to establish this late in the movie what they're fighting for instead of telling us that at the beginning.
It's true because it's not. The motives of the general/captain are not super clear. You can assume that maybe he has the same motives as the other like resistance fighters who
But he seems to be on a different level.
But he's like
he's the one that killed Regis, right?
Yeah, he was.
Yeah.
So he's not like he's with Niflheim. He's privy to the whole situation.
And that's the part that's so weird to me is that they were on the front lines. These characters were on the front lines fighting Niflheim. They do not want Niflheim taking over. But when the king surrenders those lands, they just say, yeah, F you, I'm going to join Nibelheim to fight you now.
Yeah,
I mean, I guess that makes sense, but I guess I would have thought that this resistance would have been, no, we're going to oppose both.
Yeah, we're our own
You know what I
thing.
mean?
Yeah.
We don't want any of you ruling us anymore. We want our own lands back. We want our freedom and our liberty. We don't want your sovereignty anymore. But instead, they just leave one side to join the other.
Yeah.
And the other side that actually is the one that destroyed their
the other side that actually came through to do all the damage that these people were trying to defend you from but can't. You're okay. I'll join you now.
Yeah.
The people. It's just like I don't.
And then
like
in the
that.
case of Libertas, just as quickly change their mind again.
Yeah.
And go like, oh crap, never mind. This wasn't a good idea. I didn't realize exactly what was going on. And like we were saying, like I think that whole subplot of the resistance arising within a matter of like 2 days or something, and then whatever, I think it could have been done away with, and you wouldn't have lost a heck of a lot. Like supposedly, that's
Just say
maybe how they
Niflheim.
knew the inner workings of where the crystal was, or something like that. But you know,
that also there's
a
the
beam
character
coming out of it. You can fetch and figure out.
Yeah, you know where it is.
who is I know, and there's like it's all flashy and stuff. Who is the character that kind of talks down to our dude when he first comes back and it's like, you disobeyed orders?
Yeah, that guy.
We see him a couple times, but he only interacts with Nyx twice, right?
Yeah.
First time is to tell him, you suck, you immigrants think you can come in, I hate you guys. And then at the very end where he comes back in and he's like, hey, I'll protect you, we're friends after all, right? And it's kind of like they wanted to have this kind of full circle thing happen where it's like, oh, I came to the realization that even though you're different from us, we're the same, and I actually believe in your cause, I'm going to fight with you now. But he's gone. He had that whole character development away from us, I guess. Yeah. And I feel like that scene was supposed to mean something because he gives a smile and the camera holds on him for a while and he's like, "I'm going to help you," and it was supposed to be a meaningful scene. But we only ever had one other scene with him talking to Nyx, and it was them, and it was him just talking down to us. So it was like the character development
it's too
isn't
many
there,
characters,
but they're trying to show that it happened, even though.
Yeah.
It didn't happen.
See it.
I didn't see it.
Yeah. So it's like a lot of stuff could have been cut, and it
Yeah.
actually might have improved.
Oh, totally.
But when you cut those things in like reference to the game, we don't know exactly what's going on.
Oh well.
So it could be. I mean, sure, it made the movie better, but it could be that like, oh, this has some significance. We just don't really know yet.
Yeah.
And given that this is just a cutscene prelude, you know, it could still come back into play, and maybe we'll figure out people's motivations later. I don't know, but at the moment, it seems pretty confusing. Yeah, now we've been trashing a lot of things in the movie in the past 30 minutes. We liked it, okay? I mean, it's not like it wasn't a bad movie. I thought it was really cool. It's just they had some irreconcilable decisions, the problems with this film that are really hard to get around.
It's not a problem with the ideas. It's a problem with the exexection.
Exactly.
And the techniques.
The game will probably be sweet, and the world is still fetching sick, right? Mm-hmm. But just this film definitely...
in isolation, any given scene is, for the most part, fine. But then you start stringing them together, and that's where you start having issues.
And you start having to reorient yourself every time.
Yeah, so
which these are cutscenes. I mean, you think of it that way. It's almost as if you just string cutscenes along, and you kind of miss a lot of things. But
so well, man.
I think we pretty thoroughly covered.
We basically told you guys the whole story. So.
in a very.
But yeah, I mean, just to reiterate, like there's a lot of problems with the film, I feel, and a lot of things that just demonstrate that the filmmakers don't really know how to make a great film. But I think that the groundwork and the potential for a great story to take place in this world is all there. Their outline of events is pretty solid. It's just that the overall execution was just subpar for me, and that's why I don't think it's a great movie.
But the movie's cool. It's cool. It's a cool movie.
I have to say, like, I've been excited for Final Fantasy 15, but like kind of like a little, I don't know, since a little like trepidation, just like not totally like
me too,
ready to be 100% convinced by any of the marketing. But this is the most excited I've been for Final Fantasy 15. After this, it's like, all right, give us a taste of this world. I freaking want to get in this world.
I know, dude. Around.
Yeah,
go around and
It definitely. It's been nice to have this anime and this film leading up to it to sort of like give you a taste of what the world is like, right? Because you didn't really get that for Final Fantasy 13, so I kind of like dove into that, and it was just kind of all presented at once, and I got this bad taste in my mouth from this kind of some of these poor execution of techniques again of storytelling from it. That world is actually pretty cool as well, but it was all sour to me because of this really poor execution. And at least with this, like this movie, I'm not a huge fan of, but the anime I was, and I got a really good taste of what the world's like in the anime too. So like what this shows me is that there's really good stories that can be told in this world.
There's good elements
because the world is consistently good in both things. So it's going to be good in the game. But even though they didn't do as well, in my opinion, from what just my perspective at telling this story, that's not like an end-all be-all thing for me. I know that other people are telling this story over here. Other people are on the team executing those ideas. And other people were on this team executing these ideas, and they did a good job. I liked this one.
The director of this movie is not the director of the game.
Right. He was a co-director on Advent Children, though, which to me makes sense because I have similar problems with Advent Children as I do with this movie. To a lesser extent with that, I like that movie better.
It's unfortunate that it seems like
it's following Cloud. If this movie followed Noctis, it would have been a lot better. It would have been more grounded.
It's unfortunate that I feel like the goal of Advent Children and Kingsglaive here was to get to a giant monster battle almost. Yeah, because. Those are like I love Pacific Rim. I like Godzilla and stuff, but it feels like that's what defines Final Fantasy almost at this point. That makes it so unique from everything else, other than like crystals or whatever.
Yeah, it's the summons and
it's the gigantic summons. That's like their differentiating factor. You don't see that stuff in other RPG series.
It's like when you see Behemoth and when you see these kinds of monsters, it's almost immediately
it's
recognizable as Final Fantasy,
which is kind of weird because that is not something you could say about it necessarily with the first half of the franchise's lifespan.
Yeah.
At this point, though, it's a fairly consistent thing.
Yeah.
I think it was for Final Fantasy 14 for the MMO, like one of the first trailery things they put out. It was like. They were fighting some unbelievably gigantic.
It's the Marlboro, which is like the tentacle, like large round poison monster. That was just also a recognizable Final Fantasy monster.
It was freaking huge, and I just remember like being blown away by how huge that was. But it's almost like that's a mainstay now.
Yeah,
Final Fantasy, which is not good or bad, but I think it is weird how it's almost like it just kind of came in under the radar, and now a Final Fantasy game without anything big. Like that. I don't know if you can imagine. Not Final Fantasy.
Something else.
Well, geez.
All right, guys.
Well, that was
spoilers are over.
Tell us why we're wrong about the movie.
I mean, again, we haven't slept on these opinions yet, and a second viewing will be helpful, I'm sure. Which I think all of us will want to do is watch it again. But, anyways, those are our feelings on it right now, and we're gonna move on here to but offer your opinions and your insight, because I'm sure there's a lot we can learn from you that we didn't see or didn't understand. So feel free to give your perspective.
And I have to say something. Sometimes it's like in a movie that has so much stuff packed in, it's like, oh, you missed this. This was the reason why this guy did this. And it's like, that's fair. There is a reason in the film. However, it was their mistake to put so much in there that your average viewer could miss something that important.
Right.
You know what I mean? So oftentimes we'll express opinions about these sorts of things and we'll get feedback that like, no, there was.
Yeah. Oh, if you look in the background out of focus on the bottom right corner of the frame, you'll see a small little Nintendo NX. And that's supposed to tell you that it all makes sense.
But anyway,
it's no, dude, it's got to be explicit. It can't be a hidden anything. Right.
Yeah, so that's...
Not to say that
discredit
that like Inception, for instance. Like I didn't totally understand that on the first viewing, but I got all the important things. And then when you go back through it, you peel the layers away and you start to get deeper meanings. Yeah, that is what I think you want. You want something that's rewatchable or replayable to get deeper meaning every time you go through it, but you want the viewer to not feel confused by the end. You want them to at least get the idea of what happened.
And I would like to watch this movie. I think we're gonna watch it again at some point. Maybe not all together, but like in Japanese. Like
I really want to see it in Japanese. Yeah.
And so we'll have that chance to watch it again.
Just take the bad voice acting out of it, and it makes so much. I would imagine
it would
help a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna blow through these pretty quickly, but Final Fantasy 15 it's been announced or talked about by Hajime Tabata that the first half of the game will be an open world structure, and that the second half will be a much more linear sort of story driven.
Yeah. So structure. What's interesting about the way he phrased it, or at least I want to look at the Japanese in there, but the English translation that's been circled around is he's saying that about the story.
Oh.
So, and then apparently on the second half, he's saying like if you follow the main path or whatever, and then because they were asking about how long the game is too, like 30 to 50 hours or something, but
from
that implies that there are some forks or that, maybe it's just side quest type material. I don't know, but.
Or they're expecting you to get lost in this huge open world for a couple hours, and some people will do better than others.
Well, here's the thing with open world storytelling, or with open world games. It's almost become synonymous in gaming today with open world good, linear bad.
Right.
And that is not a good thing, I think. That's not a very that's a very narrow-minded sort of view of it. Yes, open worlds are more fun to explore and interact with because linear worlds are bound. You see the boundaries.
Well be watching a film.
Yeah, right? You see the boundaries more easily, which breaks immersion. So let's just take Final Fantasy XIII's world structure in comparison to like The Witcher's. In The Witcher, you're told you're in this vast world. You're given this vast world, and when I look to that mountain or when I look to that lake, like I can actually go there. There are bounds, but you got to really go out of your way to get to the edge of the map to find those bounds. In Final Fantasy 13, you're told you're in this huge world and there's Cocoon and then there's this big world underneath. And later in the game they have a big open field, but for the most part you're in an open space, like a really wide open space, but you are bound by a narrow path. You can't go that way or that way. You have to go forward or back. But the space that you're in is huge. And when you come across boundaries constantly, it can feel very limiting and it can break immersion. That's, I think, the reason why linear is seen as bad and open as good. But when it comes to storytelling, there is something very, very true about the fact that in an open world, you really lose the consequence and the urgency of storytelling. A great example is Meteor in Final Fantasy VII coming to destroy the planet, and you could spend conceivably as long as you want doing side quests before that event happens. There is no ticking clock. There is nothing actually driving you to that event until you choose to do it. So all the urgency of that event that they're telling you is going to happen doesn't actually exist. Same can be said for games like The Witcher, where they'll tell you about a plot to assassinate a king and meet us here, and we're going to plot out how we're going to do this. And then you decide, well, I don't really want to do that right now. I'm going to go to Skellige and do like a whole plot line that takes like in-game time, like maybe a month to complete. And then I'll come back and all you'll be waiting for me to initiate this. That's not how it would work. That loses all the urgency of what these characters are trying to do. So
Well, see, like besides like those are great points, and to me, I think open world games create a problem of it's similar to like a choose your own adventure. If you get a choice that branches out to more choices that branch out to more choices, it starts to get impossible to manage, which is why you need like quest systems and stuff to keep it organized. But if you get far enough into Skyrim, guaranteed you've got like 15 or 20 things you haven't gotten to yet that all have their own storylines and things, and you're juggling them. Right? Which one do I do? You've got to pick one. You can do a little bit of all of them at the same time, but what that ends up doing is the farther into the game you get, the more you have on your plate, it starts to get overwhelming. It's not all pointing the same direction.
Right.
And so there's tons of people that have not completed the main storyline of Skyrim or the Imperial what do you call it? The Imperial Rebel storyline of Skyrim. I'm trying to think what they're even called. Because there's ways you can work that out, but there's like when I've played, I don't know how many. I probably played like 200 hours of Skyrim total, probably somewhere around there. I don't know. And I never completed that whole Imperial whatever storyline. Like I never did that. The Civil War quest. I never completed that. I completed the main storyline of the game. I completed the Dark Brotherhood and some Thieves Guild stuff. And on one end, that's the strength of those types of games. You can choose your own adventure, right? You can, I'm a thief and I do this, and then that was the game for you. Right. But obviously, that's not what Final Fantasy 15 is trying to do.
And it's not what it should be. Yeah.
No, exactly. Yeah. And to me, because a lot of people I've read, they're saying like, well, usually games are linear to begin with in Final Fantasy, and then they open you up. So like Final Fantasy 7, by the time you get to the end, you can go anywhere you want and race chocobos all day long. It doesn't matter. Or like Final Fantasy 9 is more linear, and then it really opens up later on, right? You can go anywhere. And this is like flipping that on its head, which I think is good because it hopefully means everything's pointing ultimately to the same goal, and it's cohesive and makes sense. So
it's like this is, I imagine you'll get to a point where they'll prompt you to save. Be like, you're going to want to save right now, just so you know.
Yeah, a point of no return.
Point of no return here. Once you pass this, you cannot come back here anymore. Right. And I imagine there'll be something like that where like everything then becomes very structured, and we're driving you towards the end of the story. And that is a good thing, in my opinion. That's good because that means an event is going to happen, and there's going to be urgency to that event. I can't just go off and breed chocobos or go do this or that when impending doom is upon us. This is something that needs to be addressed right now, and you can't just choose to ignore it and have it wait on you to be ready. Like, I think that's a good thing, and that's why linearity should not be equated to being like a bad choice in game design. It depends on the story that you're trying to tell, and obviously here they're trying to tell a very specific, focused story.
But again, it's an execution thing. It's there's linear games that are executed very well, and there's ones that aren't.
I love the Prince of Persia trilogy. Those 3 games, Sands of Time, totally linear, like no openness to it whatsoever. There's only one path you can go. Yeah, and I love those games. I think they tell great stories, and they're very fun to play. All the exploration kind of comes more, especially in the second game, with like learning the combos and learning. It's like the fighting is really like what you explore. But the puzzle solving elements of it are really fun too. But it's kind of like Zelda too. Like Zelda's traditionally not real open world. There's a linear, like you have to go to this dungeon, then this one, then this one. You need this item, then this item, then this item. You can't do it in whatever order you want. And this new one is going to be open, and it's going to be very different.
Well, you know what Miyamoto said, and this is kind of to the credit of, or just to goes along with what we're talking about here, as far as like you kind of sacrifice story elements when you have an open world game. Miyamoto said that this new Breath of the Wild will not be like a story-oriented game. Like, you'll have to go out of your way to figure out the story, because you could kind of go to the boss and take a fast track and do it pretty quickly in Breath of the Wild. And he's saying that the story won't be very clear if you do that, but you can do it.
It's exactly how Dark Souls is.
And that's kind of the problem. I mean, in Final Fantasy, can you imagine playing a Final Fantasy game and you go and beat the boss and you don't even know what's been going on in this world? Yeah. Like, I wouldn't like that game, and of course I have the choice. I can go and do whatever I want, but that's where the people who made the game kind of lose the artistry of, directing the story and directing, having things evolve and unfold in a specific order.
Pacing,
because I think that's important. Yeah, pacing, all of that kind of stuff. It goes out the window when people can do whatever they want. And so in Breath of the Wild, it seems that their solution to that is, well, just kind of have not much of a story. And if you want to figure it out, you can figure it out. But I kind of like stories, you know. I like having cliffhangers and events that are about to happen and foreshadowing and all those things. It's very difficult to do in open world games.
You know how you can look back on history of gaming, you can see trends. You can see the brown color palette trend, where that finally went away.
15 years
I wonder if we're in the midst of an era that is going to be looked back on as like everyone's obsessed with sandbox style gameplay with open worlds.
I think that will,
and people finally realize that the pros and cons of that, and then realize that a hybrid approach is probably the best.
Which it sounds like Final Fantasy 15 is doing a hybrid approach, and that's
going back to linearity. I don't think that the reason people complain about the linearity in Final Fantasy 13 and even to some extent in 10 was the fact that the story's driving you forward and you don't have a lot of choices on what to do. It's the actual physical area space that you're exploring is just a straight line. And it's bound very close. You can still tell.
That makes me wonder.
You can.
What was he referring to?
See, and that's why in the English translation, someone was saying story, and I wish I'd done this beforehand, but I'm going to look at the Japanese.
I think having a linear structure to the story is going to be fine for people because it does create that sense of urgency, as long as you create a space for us to traverse that doesn't. You don't see those boundaries so obviously.
Right, invisible walls or everything's in a canyon.
Yeah, it's
I heard a theory that not as many people, and there's no data behind this, just so everybody knows what I'm saying, but from observation, not as many people seem to complain about the linearity of 10 as 13.
Yeah, they don't. Not even close.
Okay.
And I've heard that it was almost like a graphical fidelity issue, that it was like in 13 they did such a great job of showing all these environments and things, but not ever allowing you to go where you wanted to in those environments. Yeah. And so it was like they created the desire to explore and didn't create an outlet for that. Where in 10 there wasn't as much that was like,
and at that time they didn't have all these open world sandbox games that we do now
that anyone could compare it to. Yeah.
Right? Oh, good point, yeah.
Well, I mean, still like you compare that to 9 or 7 or whatever, it's still more
in 10 you still functionally had that capability to go wherever you want at a certain point when you get the airship. It's just that all the maps were like
they're just bridges
like
to
this.
Yeah.
You didn't get to a world map where you can run on the world map from this town to that town.
Which is funny because it's almost like that doesn't really matter because it makes no functional difference, but
utilitarian. That's right. Utilitarian standpoint, it's exactly the same function.
You get the same result,
but you don't
just how people feel
like you're going across this vast world.
Because it is cool. Like I remember the first time I played Final Fantasy 7, and you get out and you're like, holy crap, and you you try and look out towards the horizon, see the curvature of the earth, and you're like, I'm going to run out here and find stuff, and there's a house over there, or there's a city over here. That is cool.
That was cool.
That's probably an irreplaceable feeling,
Right.
Like you can't do anything to really simulate that other than literally have that be the case.
Let people do it, yeah.
It's like my favorite phase in any game of Civilization is the exploration phase. Because it's like, I'm finding stuff. There's a thing here. I wonder what's over there.
And
once everything's known, it's...
For me, the reason I play Elder Scrolls, the fun part, what I do when I sit down, and I've said this on the podcast before, I think, but I would set goals to, I'm going to discover that, and that location today. Mm-hmm. It was not about, I'm going to go complete this much of the story and do this quest,
5
or go fight this boss. That's not the reason I played it. I played it to just get a sense for the world. And one of the most satisfying feelings for me when playing Skyrim was when I had discovered all those. But in my mind, I had a really definite layout in my head. I knew where everything was. And so at any point, you could plop me blindfolded into any area in Skyrim if you were to build a replica of it, and I would open my eyes and know where I was. Because I explored that world so thoroughly. And that's the enjoyment I get out of big open world games. But the story of Skyrim, I think it's competent, and I don't think it's bad.
it's definitely not as strong as something that's more linearly and explicitly told, like something out of an older Final Fantasy game, or like The Witcher. Well, The Witcher focuses more on story, but it's also open world. That's not the best example, but I think you know what I'm trying to say. Like, I play Skyrim for a different reason than I play Final Fantasy.
The world of the Elder Scrolls games is a character in and of itself.
And Dark Souls is another example. Like, I don't get into reading all the item descriptions, and not to say that it's not great. It is, and other people get into that. That's totally valid. It's just not the reason I play it. Like, the reason I play it is to explore this environments, these worlds, and fight and that sort of thing. And I'm not there for the story.
And you know that a lot of these Japanese, I feel like honestly so much of this, the open world trend does come back to Skyrim specifically.
Yeah.
And not as much like Oblivion or Morrowind.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I feel like Skyrim was the first game that really did it in a sense that was consistently evoking like a sense of awe.
Yeah.
And I think anybody who plays Skyrim is like, holy crap, I just want to like live here.
Yeah.
Like, this is so cool.
Yeah.
And you're constantly going to new places that like, wow, this is so cool. And I feel like that's what like Aonuma, you know, I can see him playing Skyrim and being like, dang, like, how do I evoke this in a Zelda game? You know what I mean? I can see people going to that well for like, because that's an emotion that I don't think there's a lot of different ways that you can get it. You know what I mean? So it's like playing Red Dead Redemption, and that you're going up over that crest, and you cross the river in the sunset, and that guitar music kicks in, and like, that's a moment in a game that you can only really have in that kind of game. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
Interesting.
So
Okay, so those are our feelings on
Half open, half linear.
Open and linear structure of Final Fantasy 15. This one's gonna be really quick because it was just kind of funny, but
it's sort of weird. There's all these conspiracy theories on the internet, but Nintendo yesterday. Well, so it was on Monday. Had an announcement where Reggie Fils-Aimé just showed a Galaxy 3DS that looked like it had some crappy Galaxy clip art, whatever, from Google image search slapped on the top, and it was like, what is this? Out of nowhere. No one was excited for it. They're literally actually selling it on Amazon, so everyone's thinking like, this has to mean something. This has to mean something. And then today, which is now, it was just Tuesday, they just announced that on Thursday there will be a 3DS exclusive Nintendo Direct coming up. So I get this sense that the two things are tied. So we're going to see like what happens here.
Thursday.
But that just Galaxy thing was so weird on its own.
Yeah.
If it's really that's all it is.
It doesn't. It's just a plate. Why did they have this introduction video? Like, they could have just listed that or put a press release or...
It's got to mean something deeper than here's a terrible looking cosmetic 3DS.
It's not good looking. And Reggie's sitting there saying this is his favorite 3DS so far. It's his favorite one. I'm like, oh my gosh, can't you play the Super Famicom one that's out in Japan?
The Super Famicom one is way sweeter than that. Way sweeter.
That looks awesome.
The Super Famicom one and the Pikachu one and the Yoshi one and any other combination of plates, but this stupid Galaxy thing, it just
it doesn't have any relevance to the company.
No,
unless
it
they're
doesn't
announcing
mean anything.
something.
Right. There might be a
related to
Mario
it.
Galaxy.
And that's something
is
of Mario Galaxy
on 3DS.
Mario Galaxy.
But it's not a galaxy. It's a nebula. Like it's a.
They're calling it a galaxy.
They're calling it a galaxy, but it's like a nebula cloud. It's not a galaxy.
I saw one guy was speculating the return of Space World. Oh, are they going to start doing Space World again? Which is like Nintendo hasn't done. Well, that was where like the GameCube was announced.
Oh, that's right.
Nintendo used to run Space World, but it's gone now.
What if everybody that pre-ordered that gets an NX instead of a 3DS?
They're like, you guys are really...
Yeah, you guys
are big Nintendo fans.
Good job. This is our reveal.
Who knows?
It's so funny because they're getting so close to the announcement of the NX, and now they're doing this big 3DS announcement.
September.
That's why.
What in the world are you doing right now?
It's confusing. So I thought that was hilarious. But so user submitted questions that we've got one that we're going to get to here. But yeah, guys, submit us questions every week. We go back to even past videos, and we're like, was there a good one on this one?
And we would have done more, but we knew this Kingsglaive review was going to be long.
we
didn't anticipate it being an hour and a half long review, but that's why we
as
only
long
have
as
one.
the movie was.
Yeah,
just play it alongside.
Just watch it, guys. Anyways.
Okay, so Matt was asking if we think there are any, I guess, topics that are inappropriate for games to explore. Whether we think that there should be... I think that at the center of this question might be
the topic of censorship in a lot of games that come out from like Japan here when they're localized and stuff.
Like, do any censorships like have a point? Like, oh, this really should have been.
You know, this is. It's really funny that this is like kind of a big hot topic with video games because video games are a young medium, and when it almost totally parallels the issue with comics back in the 1930s and 40s.
Yeah,
where parents they were very violent originally. They had very mature subject matter in them, but the kids were the ones reading them. And so the parents were like, you know, this is not appropriate, like, for my kids to read. I don't want my kids to read this. They were blaming comics for violent tendencies in kids and all exactly the same arguments they make about video games now. And so for a while, it's what they call, I think, the Silver Age of comics. So you have, like, the Golden Age, which was the origin of these superhero characters, which were much darker. And then you have the Silver Age, which is where they turned them all into just really silly comical stuff. That's where the Batman television series kind of came out. Anyways, so, you know, the same kinds of questions are being brought up with video games now. And I mean, my personal view is no, they don't have an effect on behavior. I don't think there's any evidence that suggests that it does. But there is something, I think, just like maybe intuitively concerning about putting a kid in a position where they are a terrorist, murdering people, where you're actually you're interacting with an action like that. You're not just observing it. You're not just reading about it. You're literally doing it. In a game like Call of Duty,
Modern Warfare 3,
Modern Warfare 2,
is it 2?
In that airport where you're massacring people, in Hatred, which is a game about a mass shooter just going out and just killing as many people as you can.
All the Postal games.
There's a lot of violence and sexuality and things like that where the difference is not just that you're an observer, you're participating in it. And I think there is something, whether or not there's any scientific basis for it, that just kind of concerns us. Like, I'm participating, is that going to carry over into how I act in real life? I don't think there's any evidence for it. You have to look at it scientifically and say, no. That doesn't mean that people who already have violent tendencies might not use video games to, you know, blow off some of that aggression, and that, like, feeding into that, if they already have those tendencies, that might carry over to real life. There's not to say that for some people it won't affect the way they think and feel in real life, but I think as a whole, it's pretty clear for most people that this is fiction, and that people don't go out and, trying to say that video games encourage, like, sexism, they cause, like, sexism in kids, or that they cause violence in kids. You'd have to also say, why are kids not going out stealing cars when they play Grand Theft Auto? You know, like, if it's going to affect the way they behave in this way, then all the things they do in video games would also be carrying over into, you know, real life as well. They'd be, I don't know, like jumping off buildings and like doing all the crazy stuff that you see in the games. That's a rudimentary, like, really, like, not a very well structured argument. I realize that, but what I'm trying to say at the heart of it is that
games are about, even violent games are about more than just that, right?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things that happen in them.
There's a lot more to it than that.
Focusing on just that one.
And we're trying to say that this particular thing that helps push my agenda, I'm saying that video games cause this to happen in real life. They carry over into behavior. But if you're going to say that that is happening, then all the other things video games are also doing should also be carrying over.
Yeah, I think the only thing that studies have shown is that certain games can increase like aggression, but not in measurable ways, but not in anything substantial to, like, you're killing somebody. Basically, like, it can make somebody more agitated. They've shown that actually not just killing people, but that poor, like, controls that just, like, suck basically can actually increase
frustration,
agitation levels to where somebody is measurably more likely to act violently. And that's not even because they were killing people in a game.
That goes back to Atari. right?
Yeah, exactly. It could be any
play
kind
Pong,
of game.
and it's like, it's not working. No,
And
I
if it
did this.
really,
Fetch this. And get all
games
mad,
where the controls are really bad actually can. But yeah, that's a far cry from actually killing anybody.
Right.
But to me, like I see this and I think of not even more of the things on like the violence end, but almost more of the things on like the stuff that's like borderline pedophilia in some of the games that come out of Japan and there are some games where it's like, okay, I guess there's like a niche audience for this, but like for example, like Gal Gun, you can like I believe there's a special edition of it that comes with what they call a screen cleaner, but it's like a set of like cute little like panties basically, and stuff like that is like I see it and I'm just like, okay, I just don't see the valid place for this in society. I don't believe in necessarily censoring that, but Japan actually this past year faced an issue with the United Nations that had some group within the UN wanted to put forward a resolution that was condemning Japan for their portrayal of like children in like sexually oriented manga and anime and in video games, and basically and it was a big deal in Japan because it was basically the UN like condemning Japan's culture, and there were a lot of people that came out to defend that. One of them specifically was this woman who wrote one of the earliest more like erotic animes in I think the 60s or 70s, and she was this woman basically saying it was supposedly it took place in France. It was about two gay boys in France, and they loved each other, and it was very explicit. And but her basically, I'll have to track it down, some BBC article, but her kind of refuting, these assertions that the UN was making. But to me, I see a little more in that. I see a little more like, I don't know what end of society you're catering to with these kinds of games, but at the same time, I don't believe in censoring and outlawing those kinds of games completely, unless you could prove that some harm is coming from it. Right. Like some actual, like, measurable harm is coming from it.
Right. I guess, and I think an issue that a lot of people have that I don't entirely agree with, but after hearing what both of you have said about saying, well, if there's evidence, a problem with like waiting for evidence is, well, let's wait for it to happen.
Right.
And people are saying, no, it's obviously bad. Let's not let it happen in the first place. And I think that's maybe the rationale behind why a lot of these things get censored, even though there isn't research.
Well, I know like countries like Australia, they're very strict.
Oh my gosh, absolutely.
With that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. And in some cases, it's like, why wait for it to happen,
Yeah. I don't believe in censorship. I don't believe that you should... Like, let's just talk about these games that are coming from Japan. It's like, I understand why they do it, because whether or not you agree or disagree, or whether or not you feel okay with the content, our culture as a whole is opposed to that kind of content. I think specifically with the pedophilia issue, young girls being portrayed as, sexual, versus their culture where like that's not an issue. It doesn't matter if it's an issue for you personally. It's an issue for our culture at large. And by you suggesting that, this what's the, like a Puritan or puritanical sort of like view is like so whatever, but you're doing exactly the same thing that you're upset at the censorship for doing, which is condemning that the other culture. You're condemning this culture, right? And you have to understand that cultural constructs like this exist, and they exist for reasons, and they change over time, and we should talk about changing them if we feel like there's harm in those constructs, again, that we can actually measure. But if we can't, then you kind of have to just accept that's the way things are. But, so I understand why they do it. They're trying to avoid that kind of controversy that would be negative for the negative press for their game. But at the same time, I don't believe that censoring someone else's culture is the right thing to do. You can disagree with it and therefore don't purchase it, don't buy it, don't consume it if you don't believe that that's appropriate. But you should not close that off to people who don't feel that way.
I feel rating systems maybe can kind of play. Like at the moment, is M the highest rating possible?
There's an AO adult.
There's an AO, but
there is an AO.
It's almost
it
never.
technically
Well, it's the same thing as like NC-17.
Yeah.
You don't
Exactly.
want
doing
it.
anything.
But
You
that's
don't
my
want it.
point. That's my point. NC-17 or X or anything before it, it killed movies. Movies that were rated that did not do well, but they weren't banned. They sometimes, and even still, sometimes they're made. And you can get them if you want. I guess most theaters don't show it. I don't know.
Right. You won't
in
get
the
distribution with most major chains.
Yeah, most distribution it's very difficult, but it's not. And in that way, it's kind of like we've roundabout censored it, but we still get to say, "Oh, we're not censoring."
Right.
But we basically did censor. But I'm more okay with that. If there's like a game using the adult only, let cultures rate games. Like let the ESRB obviously along with who does the Peggy.
In Europe.
And anyways, they know their cultures best and they can rate things. I don't think they should censor things or block things, but you can put that adult-only rating on it if you feel that people in your culture are more sensitive to this or, something like that. I feel like... And that will kind of do it for you. It'll kill the game because it won't be advertised very well. Right. But it's still there. If you're into that, you can still find it.
And see, that's where I feel like at least in the United States, the rating system, I feel like it's broken in the United States because 99% of games out there are it's not 99% of games out there, but 99% of the games that people talk a lot about. Like, for example, any new Final Fantasy game, it's going to be either one of two ratings, either teen or mature.
Yeah, and that actually kind of doesn't tell you much anymore.
It doesn't tell you much.
Right.
It does not tell you much. Most big franchises, it's either this or this. It's there's two ratings because E is Nintendo qualifies for with a lot of their games, but it used to be there were more E games, like Banjo-Kazooie, like with
before
the platformers.
Graphics got
almost
so good.
all platformers were E.
Yeah.
There aren't platformers as much anymore.
That's true.
But yeah, it's
but
just
also
so many games.
The graphics weren't that good. I mean, you could have like the first Smash Brothers was I think rated KA or something like that, but then the newest one is it teen?
Is it teen?
Anyways, it looks more real now. So
it doesn't mean anything anymore. It's your teen or your mature. And I know they add those extra little things. Those got this, and this. That doesn't tell anyone anything either. I don't feel like like fantasy violence means nothing. Yeah, it means nothing. What does that mean? If I say fantasy violence, close your eyes. What are you seeing?
A gnome killing an elf.
I mean, anything, any freaking thing that's not just like using actually a person with a weapon and
killing another person.
Yeah, like with a gun or a sword.
It's too vague.
It's super vague. So I feel like the rating system, at least in the United States, needs to improve. I know the Peggy system seems to be more nuanced a little bit.
Right. Yeah.
Anyways, yeah. But I agree. Like a good rating system is going to do most of the work.
Right. You don't have to censor. You can still do it a different way.
And it's like, okay, if it becomes a marketing issue and the company says we want it, our goal is more to sell more copies, not to present something that we feel shouldn't be censored. Then they'll remove it themselves to sell the thing, and then you never have to be upset. Well, you'd be upset if you knew it was in there, but in any case,
that is part of the issue. But
in any case, I think that being on one side or the other of this issue is just not seeing the full picture. Like, yes, it's true, people should be free to consume without censorship, but at the same time, you who feel that way should also realize that by condemning this culture, you are being hypocritical because you're trying to say that the censorship is condemning this culture. But the reason it's being censored is because this culture has its own constructs and its own way of viewing these issues. And by condemning that, you're being hypocritical. So, a good rating system is the answer. Summary. A good rating system is the answer to that. Don't censor. Don't take out anything. Just rate it appropriately
for your audience, your culture.
Yeah.
Well, that was dudes.
If you watched all the way to the end, if you watched all the way to me saying this, comment the number 3, so we know
how many people are watching.
How many people actually watch? How long has this been?
2 hours.
Oh, geez, it's been a while.
Oh gosh. So, anyways, sorry it was so long, but also not sorry because I actually really enjoyed this.
Yeah, went into a lot of depth.
Yeah,
and it's really important to do that. I feel when you're going to be laying out some pretty heavy criticism on something that people are really looking forward to. It's like, look, I didn't go into this wanting to hate on it. I don't just hate it because I don't understand it. Like, I want you to get where I'm coming from, and laying that all out in detail, I think, is important. And we can disagree, but let's do it, amicably. Let's talk about the issues and discuss them fairly in a balanced way. But
fair and balanced. Dark
fair
Pixel.
And balanced. Better fair and balanced. Better videos.
If you guys are listening to the podcast audio only, Dark Pixel, we run 2 YouTube channels. One called just Dark Pixel, one called Dark Pixel Gaming. Yep. Go look us up on YouTube. Check us out on both. But this podcast is on Dark Pixel Gaming. So you can check us out. We put this podcast up every Wednesday. So
5 a.m.
weekly. Yeah.
Wednesday at 5 a.m. at Mountain Time, that is.
All right.
Okay,
right,
guys. We will see you again next week.
Yeah,
Look forward to the discussion of the comments. Peace out.
Peace.
See you.